Why would you do that? The old biker asked, his voice rough as gravel, his eyes suddenly uncertain like a man who had forgotten what kindness felt like. Emma just smiled, because everyone deserves kindness when they need it. She had no idea that $18 in one quiet moment would change everything. 3 days later, 168 motorcycles would roll into her school parking lot, not for revenge, not for trouble, but for her. If this story moves you, hit subscribe right now. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled, and stay with me until the very end, because the biggest surprise hasn't even started yet. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, and Emma Whitaker was barely holding it together. She had been at Cedar Valley Elementary for 7 months. 7 months of alarm clocks at 5:30 in the morning, of standing on her feet for 8 hours straight, of staying late to grade papers that she then brought home to grade some more. She was 29 years old, and sometimes she felt 50. Not in her body, but in a quieter place somewhere behind her eyes, somewhere in the part of her chest that never quite stopped aching. She had chosen teaching because she believed in it. Not the theory of it, not the career path of it. She believed in children. She believed that every kid who walked through a classroom door was carrying something heavy, and that a teacher's job, a real teacher's job, was to help them set it down for a few hours every day. But believing in something and surviving on that belief were two very different things. Emma pulled into the parking lot of Rosie's Roadside Diner on Route 9 that Tuesday evening because she hadn't eaten since the granola bar she'd choked down at 7 in the morning. And because the thought of going back to her apartment and sitting alone with the silence felt like too much to ask of herself. The rain had started around 4 and hadn't stopped. Her windshield wipers were the bad kind, the kind that smear more than they clear, and she'd driven the last 6 miles with her face practically against the glass. She grabbed her bag, her stack of ungraded spelling tests, and her red pen, and she ran through the rain to the door. Inside, a little bell above the door jangled. The place was half full, a couple of truckers at the counter, a young family in the far booth, a toddler smearing ketchup on the table while her parents looked too tired to care. An older waitress named Sherry, Emma knew her name because it was stitched in red thread on her shirt, was moving between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 30 years. Emma slid into a booth near the back and set her papers down. She ordered black coffee and a plate of eggs. She uncapped her red pen. For 20 minutes she existed in her own small world. She corrected spelling mistakes. She wrote encouraging notes in the margins. She put little stars next to the answers that showed real effort, even when they were wrong, because effort was what mattered. Effort was everything. She was halfway through her eggs when she heard it. Not loud, just uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that falls over a room when something is happening that nobody knows how to respond to. Emma looked up. At the counter, an older man was standing with his hands flat on the formica, and Sherry was standing across from him with her arms crossed, and the look on Sherry's face was not unkind exactly, but it was certain. It was the look of someone who had a rule and intended to enforce it. The man was big, broad-shouldered, though age had softened the edges of it. Gray blonde hair pulled back. A face that had seen weather a lot of it. He wore a black leather vest over a dark shirt, and the vest had patches on it, the kind Emma had seen before in movies and news stories, and the kind that made certain people tighten their grip on their purse without realizing they were doing it. Hell's Angels. She recognized the patch. Most people would. But the thing Emma noticed, the thing that cut straight through whatever assumption her brain tried to make, was his expression. Because the man at the counter did not look threatening. He looked embarrassed. He looked the way a person looks when they're standing in a public place and something has gone wrong and they cannot fix it fast enough to stop people from noticing. "I understand," he was saying to Sherry quietly. "I'm not arguing with you. My wallet is on my bike. I walked in from the parking lot without thinking. I'll go get it right now." "Sir, you already ate," Sherry said, not cruelly but firmly. "I can't just let people walk out after they've already eaten." "I'm not walking out. I'm going to my motorcycle. It's right there in the lot. You can watch me from the window." "I can't leave the counter." "Then I'll leave my helmet. It's worth more than the meal." Sherry glanced over her shoulder toward the back where the diner owner, a heavy-set man named Gary, who Emma had seen exactly twice, was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching the exchange with his arms folded. Gary shook his head, slowly, deliberately. Sherry turned back. "I'm sorry, sir. Those are the rules." The room had gone the specific kind of quiet that feels loud. The truckers at the counter were staring at their coffee. The young mother in the far booth had stopped pretending not to look. A teenage boy near the window had his phone up in a way that suggested he was filming. Nobody moved to help. Emma set down her red pen. She looked at the man at the counter. She looked at the way his jaw was tight and his hands were still flat on the formica, not aggressive, just holding on. The way you hold on when something small is becoming humiliating and you don't know how to stop it. She thought about her student Marcus, who was 8 years old and whose shoes had a hole in the left sole that she'd noticed in October and never said anything about because she didn't want him to feel ashamed. She thought about the way he sat in the front row and raised his hand even when he wasn't sure of the answer, because she had told him that trying was the whole point. She thought about the look on the biker's face. It was the same look. Underneath the leather and the patches and the gray in his hair and the decades of whatever life had put him through, it was the same look. Emma stood up. She picked up her coffee cup and walked to the counter. Sherry looked at her. "What's the total?" Emma asked. Sherry blinked. "Excuse me. His bill. What's the total?" A pause. $18.40. Emma opened her wallet. She had a 20. She put it on the counter. "Keep the change," she said. The diner was so quiet she could hear the rain against the windows. The man at the counter turned to look at her. And this was the moment, the real moment, the one that would echo forward through everything that came next, because the expression on his face was not simple gratitude. It was something more complicated than that. It was the look of a person who has spent a long time building walls and just felt one of them move. "Why would you do that?" he asked. His voice was low, rough, like gravel that had been rained on. Emma met his eyes. They were blue, she noticed. A tired blue, the kind of blue that used to be sharper. "Because everyone deserves kindness when they need it," she said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she smiled, not the bright teacher smile she used in the classroom, but something smaller and truer, and she turned and walked back to her booth. She picked up her red pen. She went back to her spelling tests. Behind her, she heard the man clear his throat. She heard him say something quiet to Sherry that she couldn't make out. She heard the bell above the door jangle a minute later. She did not look up. She didn't think about it the way a person thinks about a grand gesture. She thought about it the way you think about holding a door open. You do it because somebody needs it held, and then you go on with your day. But the man who walked out of that diner into the rain was not going on with his day. He was standing next to his motorcycle with the rain hitting the back of his neck, and he was thinking about a tired woman with a red pen and a worn school badge on her jacket and a $20 bill she probably needed more than she'd let on. His name was Jack Sullivan, and he had a very good memory for people who deserved to be remembered. Emma Whitaker had come to Cedar Valley 7 months ago with 2 suitcases, a box of books, and a job offer from a district that was, in the polite language of education administrators, facing resource challenges. In plain language, this meant the school was underfunded, understaffed, and operating on a budget that had been squeezed so many times it had started to lose its shape. Cedar Valley Elementary served just over 300 students, most of them from working-class families, some of them from families that were working class in the sense that they worked multiple jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on. Emma had known this going in. She had asked about it during her interview specifically because she wanted to know what she was walking into. The assistant principal, small woman named Carol Reyes, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had survived 17 years in public education, had been honest with her. "The kids are wonderful," Carol said. "The resources are not. If you're coming here expecting to find a well-oiled machine, you'll be disappointed. If you're coming here because you genuinely want to make a difference with children who need it, then you'll find exactly what you're looking for." Emma had taken the job the same day. By October, she was spending her own money on supplies. Pencils, notebooks, construction paper, the big box of crayons, 64 colors, that the school budget didn't cover. She kept a small box in the back of her closet at home where she put things she found on sale: granola bars, packs of socks, a few pairs of gloves for when the temperature dropped. She left them in her desk drawer and let students take what they needed without making a production of it. She didn't tell anyone she was doing this. It wasn't about recognition. It was just necessary. The same way breathing is necessary. But there was something else in Cedar Valley Elementary that Emma had not anticipated. Something that had started in September as a small unease and grown by November into something she couldn't ignore. His name was Richard Hale. He had arrived 3 weeks after Emma appointed by the school district as a new administrative coordinator. He was 44 years old, impeccably dressed in a way that seemed almost theatrical against the backdrop of a school where most of the teachers wore comfortable shoes and kept a spare change of clothes in their desk drawers in case of art project casualties. Richard wore pressed shirts and tailored slacks. He carried a leather portfolio. Han had the kind of smile that arrived exactly on schedule, exactly as wide as the situation called for, and disappeared the moment it was no longer needed. Emma had noticed that smile immediately. She was the kind of person who noticed smiles. She noticed which ones reached people's eyes and which ones didn't. Richard Hale's smile never reached his eyes. In the first month, he had mostly stayed out of the classroom, teacher's way, spending his time in the administrative office, reviewing records, reorganizing filing systems. Meeting with the principal, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Alan Marsh, who Emma had come to understand was brilliant with children and somewhat less brilliant at noticing when the people around him were not what they appeared to be. But in October, Richard had begun appearing in the teacher's lounge, sitting at the round table with his portfolio open, asking pleasant questions about supply needs and classroom budgets, taking notes in a precise, orderly handwriting that Emma found somehow unsettling without being able to explain why. "He's just doing his job," Carol had said when Emma mentioned her unease one afternoon. "The district sent him to review administrative efficiency. It's protocol." "Protocol," Emma repeated. Carol looked at her over her reading glasses. "You have a suspicious mind, Emma." "I have a careful mind," Emma said. Carol had smiled at that, but she hadn't disagreed. The first concrete moment, the moment when unease shifted into something harder and colder, came in November. Emma had been asked to sign a supply requisition form. This was normal. She signed supply requisition forms regularly. But this form listed items she had never ordered: 3 sets of laminating film, 2 boxes of specialty construction paper, a bulk order of printer cartridges totaling $480. "I didn't order these," Emma said to the school secretary, a young woman named Pam, who always seemed slightly overwhelmed. Pam blinked at the form. "Oh, well, Mr. Hale said all the classroom teachers were signing off on their supply records. It's just a formality." "A formality," Emma said slowly, "but these items aren't in my classroom. Maybe they're in storage." Emma checked the supply storage room that afternoon. No laminating film, no specialty construction paper, no printer cartridges. She took a photo of the form with her phone. She did not sign it. That evening, she stayed late and pulled up the supply requisition records for the past 3 months, which were kept in a shared drive that all teachers had access to. She spent 2 hours going through them, line by line. What she found made her sit back in her chair and stare at the ceiling for a long moment. There were dozens of orders, like the one she'd been asked to sign, items that didn't exist in the school, supplies that had supposedly been delivered but were not in any storage room. Amounts that added up quietly and precisely to thousands of dollars. Someone was stealing from the school, and someone was using the teacher's signatures to make it look legitimate. Emma closed the drive. She sat in the quiet of her empty classroom, listening to the sound of the heating system clicking and groaning, and she felt a kind of cold clarity settle over her that was different from anger. It was the feeling of a decision being made in a very deep part of yourself before your conscious mind has quite caught up. She was going to find out exactly how deep this went, and then she was going to do something about it. The next day, she made a mistake. Not a catastrophic one, not yet, but the kind of mistake that in retrospect you understand was inevitable, because she was a person who believed in directness, and directness in a situation like this one was a weapon that could cut both ways. She found Richard Hale in the administrative office at 8:15 in the morning before the first bell rang, when the hallways were still quiet and the classrooms were still empty. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. Richard looked up from his portfolio. His smile arrived. "Of course, Emma. Close the door, would you?" She closed the door. She stood across from his desk. She did not sit down. "I was looking at the supply requisition records yesterday," she said. "I found some irregularities." A pause, very brief. A lesser observer might not have caught it. "Irregularities," Richard repeated. His tone was perfectly pleasant. "Orders for supplies that don't exist in the school. Multiple teachers listed as approving orders they didn't approve. I pulled 3 months of records, and the total discrepancy is somewhere around $12,000. Richard leaned back in his chair. He set his pen down on his portfolio. He looked at her with an expression that was almost paternal, the expression of a man who is very practiced at making people feel naive. Emma, he said, I appreciate your diligence, I really do. But what you're describing is a gap in the record-keeping system that I am actively in the process of correcting. The previous administrative framework had some significant structural issues. What looks like irregularities to you is actually a documentation backlog that I've been tasked with cleaning up. Emma looked at him steadily. Then why were teachers being asked to sign off on supplies they never received? Standard protocol for reconciling historical records. It's bureaucratic, I know, but it's how the district handles it. Can I see the documentation for that protocol? Richard's smile didn't waver, but something behind it did. Just slightly. Just enough. I'll have to pull it from the district files, he said. It might take a few days. That's fine, Emma said. I'll wait. She walked out. She knew before she reached the hallway that the documentation would never appear. Or it would appear in a form that was carefully constructed to seem legitimate without actually being so. Because the man behind her in that office was not confused. He was not managing a documentation backlog. He was counting on the teachers being too busy, too tired, too trusting to look closely. He had not counted on Emma Whitaker. 3 days passed. No documentation appeared. Richard stopped appearing in the teacher's lounge. He became suddenly very busy with district-level meetings that required him to be away from school for hours at a time. And then on a Friday afternoon, Carol Reyes appeared in Emma's classroom doorway after the last student had gone home. Carol's expression was careful. The reading glasses on the beaded chain were in her hand rather than on her face, which Emma had learned to recognize as a sign that Carol was preparing for a conversation she found difficult. I need to talk to you, Carol said. Okay, Emma said. Carol came in and closed the door. She pulled a chair from the student circle and sat down. Richard spoke to Dr. Marsh this afternoon, Carol said. About me, Emma said. It wasn't a question. About a concern he had regarding an employee who had been accessing administrative records outside of her normal scope of duties and making accusations that he described as unfounded and potentially damaging to the school's relationship with the district. Emma felt a slow pulse of something that was almost rage but colder than rage. He's getting ahead of it, she said. He knows I'm looking. Emma, Carol's voice was gentle and warning, I want you to be careful. Carol, I have 3 months of requisition records that don't add up. I have a list of supply orders that... I know, Carol said quietly. Emma stopped. She looked at Carol, the careful expression, the glasses in the hand. How long have you known? Emma asked. Carol closed her eyes briefly. I had suspicions in September. I brought them to Dr. Marsh. He said he would look into it. And Richard had an answer for everything. Documentation, context, district protocols. Dr. Marsh believed him. Carol opened her eyes. They were tired. Alan Marsh is a wonderful principal, Emma, but he trusts people. He genuinely trusts people, and that makes him vulnerable, Emma said. Yes. The room was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? Emma asked. Because I didn't want you in the middle of it. You're new here. You have a career ahead of you. This kind of fight, it doesn't always end well for the people who pick it. So we just let him keep stealing from these kids. Carol looked at her, and Emma saw something in Carol's face that she hadn't seen before. Not just tiredness, but a specific kind of grief. The grief of someone who knows what the right thing is and has been unable to find the courage to do it. No, Carol said quietly. We don't, but we have to be smart about how we fight. They sat together in the empty classroom in the quiet after school, and they talked for 2 hours. Carol told Emma everything she knew, dates, amounts, specific orders she had questioned and been given explanations for. Emma showed Carol the photographs she'd taken, the notes she'd made. By the time the sun had gone down and the parking lot outside the window had emptied, they had the outline of something real. But they also knew they were 2 women in a school district where Richard Hale had the ear of a trusting principal and the backing of district-level connections that neither of them fully understood. We need someone else, Emma said. Someone outside the school. Someone he can't reach. Carol nodded slowly. The question is who? Emma drove home in the dark. She sat in her apartment with her notes spread on the kitchen table and a cup of tea going cold beside her, and she thought about that question. Who? And very quietly, without quite knowing why, she thought about a diner on Route 9 and a man with tired blue eyes who had looked at her like she was the only real thing in the room. She didn't expect to see him again. She hadn't gotten his name. She hadn't asked for anything from him in return. The moment at the diner had been complete in itself, a small, self-contained act of decency that she'd already filed away in the part of her memory where she kept things that mattered but didn't require anything further. But Cedar Valley was a small town, and the roads around it were the kind of roads that motorcycles liked. She saw him again on a Saturday morning 11 days after the diner at the gas station on the corner of Route 9 and Mill Creek Road. She was filling up her car. He was on the other side of the pump island, an enormous black motorcycle beside him, filling up with the kind of casual efficiency that suggested he'd done it 10,000 times. He saw her at almost exactly the same moment she saw him. There was a pause, the kind of pause where both people are deciding whether to acknowledge a thing or let it pass. He nodded. She nodded back. He walked around the pump island. "I never got your name," he said. "Emma," she said. "Emma Whitaker." "Jack Sullivan." He put out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, but not performative. "I've been thinking about what you did at the diner." "You don't need to think about it. It was nothing." It wasn't nothing. He said it without drama, just a plain statement. People walk past things they shouldn't walk past all the time. You didn't. That's not nothing. Emma looked at him. In the daylight away from the diner, in the discomfort, in the judgment of the room, he looked different, still weathered, still unmistakably himself, but calmer, more present. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Do you know anything about how to document financial misconduct legally? Like what it takes to make a case that holds up?" A pause, different from the one at the pump island. This one was thoughtful. "Why are you asking me that?" Jack said. Emma looked at him for a moment. She thought about Carol's question. She thought about who. "Because I need help," she said, "and I'm running out of people I trust." Jack Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. He looked past her at the road at something she couldn't see. Then he looked back at her. "Tell me what's going on," he said, and she did. Right there beside a gas pump on a Saturday morning, with the November wind coming off the mountains and her car still clicking as the engine cooled. Emma Whitaker told a man she barely knew about Richard Hale and the missing money, and the forged approvals, and Dr. Marsh's blind trust, and Carol's quiet fear, and the hundreds of children who were going without because someone had decided that their school's budget was an opportunity. Jack listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look at his phone. He stood with his arms loose at his sides, and he listened the way people used to listen before the world got so loud. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How much documentation do you have?" he asked. "Photographs of the requisition records. 3 months. Carol has some additional records going back to September." "Who else knows?" "Carol. Dr. Marsh knows something's off, but he's been deflected. A few teachers have noticed individual things, but nobody's put it together the way I have. And Hale knows you're looking." "Yes," Jack nodded slowly. "Then you're on a clock," he said. "He's going to move before you do if you give him time." "I know. Do you have somewhere you can store the documentation outside the school? Somewhere he can't access?" "I have it on my phone and on a personal hard drive at home." "Send copies to yourself, multiple email addresses, and to someone else you trust outside the building." Emma looked at him. "You seem like you've done this before." Jack's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. "I've known people who had to fight things that were bigger than them," he said. "Some of them won. The ones who won were the ones who were organized and patient and didn't tip their hand before they were ready." "I already tipped my hand," Emma said. "I confronted him." "Yeah." Jack was quiet for a moment. "That complicates things." "How bad?" "Depends on how connected he is at the district level. If he can get to your principal before you do, he'll frame you as a disgruntled employee making unsubstantiated claims. Hostile work environment. Insubordination. That's the playbook." Emma felt the cold clarity again. "So what do I do?" Jack looked at her steadily. "You build a case that's too solid to ignore, and then you take it somewhere he can't control." "Where?" he thought for a moment. "State Department of Education or the school board directly bypassing Marsh. If the amounts are what you say, it crosses the threshold for a criminal referral. That means law enforcement gets involved, and at that point, it's out of Hale's hands." Emma nodded slowly. "You really have done this before." "No," Jack said, "but I've been around long enough to know how power works, and I've been around long enough to know what happens to good people when they don't fight smart." The wind came through again. Emma pulled her jacket tighter. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Jack looked at her for a long moment. "You paid $18 for a stranger," he said, "and you didn't look at me like I was something to be afraid of." He paused. "There aren't as many people as you'd think who'll do either of those things." He turned back to his motorcycle. "I'll make some calls," he said. "There are people I know who know how to handle this kind of thing. People who know the right places to take documentation, the right questions to ask. I'll reach out and see what I can find." "You don't have to do that." He glanced back at her. "I know," he said. He got on his motorcycle, he pulled on his helmet. And then he was gone, leaving Emma standing beside her car with the November wind in her hair and something warm and solid settling in her chest where the fear had been. She didn't know what she had just set in motion. She only knew that for the first time in weeks, she did not feel alone. And somewhere down Route 9, Jack Sullivan was already reaching into his jacket pocket for his phone, already thinking about the people he needed to call. Already thinking about a teacher with a red pen and $20 she couldn't afford to spare, and a kind of courage that he hadn't seen in a very long time. He was thinking about what it meant to repay a kindness properly. He was thinking that $18 was not the kind of debt you settled with $18. I was thinking about the receipt still folded in his vest pocket, and he was already making the first of many phone calls that would lead 3 weeks later to 168 motorcycles rolling into a school parking lot on a cold December morning. But that part of the story was not yet. That part of the story had to be earned. The Monday after the gas station. Emma walked into Cedar Valley Elementary with a different kind of weight on her shoulders. Not heavy or different. The weight of someone who has stopped waiting and started moving. She smiled at Pam in the front office. She waved to the third-grade teacher, Dan Kowalski, who was always the first one in. She went to her classroom, hung up her coat, and sat at her desk. And then she opened her laptop and spent 40 minutes before the first bell, creating a second backup of every document, every photograph, every record she had collected, sending copies to a personal email account she had created the night before. An account with a name that had nothing to do with her real name on a server that had nothing to do with the school district. Jack had told her to be organized. She was going to be organized. She was also going to be patient. That part was harder. Because Richard Hale arrived that morning in the best mood Emma had ever seen him in. He was in the hallway before school chatting with Dr. Marsh, laughing at something touching the principal's shoulder in the easy way of a man who feels completely secure. He glanced at Emma when she passed. His smile arrived on schedule, just as wide as it needed to be, just as empty as she now knew it was. "Good morning, Emma," he said. "Good morning, Richard," she said. Their voices were perfectly pleasant. The hallway moved around them. Nobody would have known anything was wrong, but Emma felt it, the specific electric tension of two people who are both pretending, both knowing the other is pretending, both calculating. It was like standing in a room with a lit fuse and watching the other person watch you watch it. She went into her classroom and closed the door. Her hands were steady. She was proud of that. By third period, she had almost convinced herself that she could hold this together for however long it took. She was in the middle of a reading lesson. Her class was working through a story about a boy who discovers his neighbor is actually a retired astronaut when there was a knock at her classroom door. It was Pam. "Emma, Dr. Marsh would like to see you during your prep period." Emma looked at the clock. Her prep period was in 40 minutes. "Of course," she said. She spent the next 40 minutes teaching with half her mind and sitting very still with the other half. When she walked into Dr. Marsh's office, Richard was already there. He was sitting in one of the two chairs across from the principal's desk, his portfolio on his knee, his expression neutral in the way of someone who has arranged a scene and is now waiting for the final actor to take their mark. Emma sat in the second chair. Dr. Marsh was behind his desk. He was a kind-faced man, mid-50s, with reading glasses that he always wore slightly too far down his nose. He looked uncomfortable, not guilty uncomfortable. The look of someone who had been handed a problem he wasn't sure how to solve and was hoping everyone in the room would be reasonable. "Emma," he said, "thank you for coming. I wanted to have a conversation, a direct one, about some concerns that have been raised." "Of course," Emma said. Richard did not look at her. He looked at his portfolio. "Richard has brought to my attention," Dr. Marsh said carefully, "that there may have been some confusion around the supply requisition process, and that some questions you raised last week may have been based on a misunderstanding of the district's documentation protocols." Emma kept her voice even. I'd be happy to look at those protocols if someone could share them with me. A pause. They're being compiled, Richard said without looking up. You mentioned that a week ago, Emma said. The room was very quiet for a moment. Dr. Marsh cleared his throat. Emma, I want to be clear that I take any concerns about school resources seriously, but I also want to make sure that we're not creating a difficult atmosphere over what may be a procedural misunderstanding. Emma looked at him. Dr. Marsh, I have photographs of requisition records that list supplies we don't have. 3 months of records. I've checked the supply room. I've checked the receiving logs. These items were ordered, approved, and billed, but they were never delivered. Dr. Marsh shifted in his chair. That could be a documentation backlog, Emma said. Yes, that's what Richard told me. Something flickered across Richard's face. The tiniest thing. There and gone. I just want to make sure, Emma continued, that when the documentation is ready, we can sit down together and go through it line by line. I think that's the most direct way to clear this up. She looked at Richard when she said it. He looked back at her. That sounds reasonable, he said, smoothly, pleasantly. I'll make sure to prioritize that. They both knew he wouldn't. Emma thanked Dr. Marsh. She stood. She walked out. She went back to her classroom, sat at her desk, and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds of feeling afraid before she picked up her red pen and went back to grading papers. 60 seconds. And then forward. That was the deal she had made with herself. That night, she called Jack. She had saved his number at the gas station, not knowing if she'd ever use it. She used it now. He picked up on the third ring. He's moving faster than I thought, she said without preamble. He's already talked to Marsh. He's framing it as a misunderstanding. There was a short silence. What did Marsh say? He's trying to smooth things over. He's not malicious. He wants everyone to be reasonable. He doesn't understand that you can't be reasonable with someone who's not. Okay, Jack's voice was steady. How much time do you think you have before he makes a harder move? Emma thought about it. A week, maybe less. He knows I have the records. He's going to want to either get ahead of them or discredit me before I can do anything with them. Then we move faster too. What does that mean? It means I've been making those calls I mentioned. There are a few people, veterans in the community, guys, who've dealt with institutional corruption before. Some of them have contacts at the state level. Some of them have relationships with people in law enforcement. I've been talking to them. Emma felt something shift in her chest. Jack, I'm not involving anyone in anything that's not legal, he said. I want to be clear about that. Nobody's going to show up at the school with a problem. This is about building the right case and getting it to the right people through the right channels. I wasn't worried about that, Emma said, and she found somewhat to her surprise that she meant it. Good, Jack said. There's a man named Dale Ferris. He's a retired accountant, spent 20 years doing forensic accounting for the state before he retired to Cedar County. He's done this kind of work before. I'd like to get him to look at your records. A retired forensic accountant, Emma said. His daughter went through the foster care system. He has a specific interest in cases involving institutions that fail kids. A pause. He's not going to charge you anything. He just wants to look at the documents. Emma was quiet for a moment. How do you know these people, Jack? A longer pause this time. I've been riding with the same group for 30 years, he said. That's a lot of people. Some of them had hard lives and turned them around. Some of them spent time on the wrong side of things and found their way back. But almost all of them have a very specific feeling about people in power who exploit the people who can't fight back, because they have been on the receiving end of it. Yeah, Emma let that settle. Okay, she said. When can Dale look at the documents? How's Thursday evening? Thursday works. She heard him shift the phone. Emma, don't sign anything Hale puts in front of you. Not one piece of paper. I know. And don't talk to Marsh again without Carol present. I know. And Jack, she said it gently. I know, I've got it. A brief silence. Then something that might have been the beginning of a laugh quickly reined in. Okay, he said. Thursday. She hung up. She sat in her kitchen with the case files spread on the table and the tea going cold beside her, and she thought about 30 years of riding and the kind of people you meet in 30 years, in the specific way that communities form around shared experience, and how the thing she had done at that diner, the small, unremarkable thing, had somehow put her in contact with a network of people who understood what it meant to fight for something when the odds were stacked against you. She hadn't planned any of this, but she was beginning to understand that some things don't need to be planned. Some things just need to be started. She picked up her red pen. She had 17 more spelling tests to grade. She graded all 17 before midnight. Thursday came faster than she expected, partly because the week was full, and partly because Richard Hale spent that entire week being extremely visible in the most carefully calculated way present at every morning meeting, cheerful in every hallway, and attentive in every interaction with Dr. Marsh, painting a portrait of professional normalcy so thorough that Emma understood exactly what it was. He was establishing his baseline, in case he needed it later. Emma kept her own baseline. She taught her class. She graded her papers. She bought a new box of 64 color crayons with her own money because the classroom set was down to 31 usable colors and her students were working on an art project. She did not avoid Richard. She did not seek him out. She was professional and unremarkable, and she watched him watching her watching him, and neither of them blinked. Thursday evening, she drove to a small house on the eastern edge of Cedar Valley where Dale Ferris lived alone since his wife had passed 3 years ago. He was 68, compact and precise, with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of eyes that looked like they were permanently in the middle of adding numbers. Jack was already there. I was sitting at the kitchen table across from Dale, a cup of coffee in front of him that he appeared to have barely touched. He nodded when Emma came in. Dale shook her hand with a firm grip and pointed to the third chair without ceremony. Jack tells me you've got 3 months of requisition records, Dale said. Let's see them. No preamble, no pleasantries. Emma decided immediately that she liked him. She pulled out her laptop and her printed copies, and she spread them on Dale's kitchen table, and for the next 2 hours, Dale Ferris went through them with the focused intensity of a man who does not waste motion. He asked questions in rapid succession. Emma answered them. Jack said almost nothing, but his presence had a quality to it that she'd started to recognize, a specific kind of steadiness that wasn't passivity, but was something more like anchoring. He sat still, and the room stayed calm because of it. Altney 45, Dale set down his pen. He looked at Emma. He looked at Jack. This is real, he said. Emma felt the breath go out of her. You're certain? Jack asked. 12 years of forensic accounting and 20 years before that as a CPA, Dale said. I know what fabricated procurement looks like. This man has been doing it for at least 3 months at this school, and he paused, tapping one of the printed pages. The pattern is too practiced. The formatting, the approval timing, the way the amounts stay just under the district's automatic review threshold. He's done this before. This isn't his first school. The kitchen was silent for a moment. Emma heard that, let it land, not his first school. Which means there's a trail somewhere, Jack said. Almost certainly, Dale said, if someone wanted to look. Then we need to find it, Emma said. Dale looked at her steadily. That's a different kind of work. That requires access to district records and possibly state education department filings, and you would need someone with the standing to request them officially. Who would have that standing? A state auditor, a law enforcement investigator, a member of the school board who knew what to ask for. Dale paused. Or a journalist who knew how to file the right FOIA requests. Emma and Jack looked at each other. I know someone at the county paper, Jack said. Reporter named Tom Briggs. He's covered local government for 15 years. He's not flashy, but he's thorough, and he has a very specific dislike of people who take public money. Emma turned back to Dale. If I bring Tom Briggs to you, would you walk him through what you found? If he understands what he's looking at and knows how to protect his sources, yes. Dale picked up his coffee. But Emma, you need to be careful about how fast this moves. If Hale gets any indication that you're bringing in outside parties, he'll move first, Emma said. He'll move first, Dale confirmed. The drive back from Dale's house was short. Jack walked her to her car. The November night was cold and clear, and the stars over Cedar Valley were the kind that you only get in small towns far from city lights. He's done this before, Emma said. She wasn't really speaking to Jack. She was just saying it out loud, putting the weight of it somewhere external. Yeah, Jack said. Some other school, some other group of kids. And whoever was supposed to catch it didn't. Emma leaned against her car door. What if we don't catch it this time either? Jack looked at her. You've got Dale Ferris saying it's real. You've got 3 months of records. You've got Carol as a witness. And you've got a journalist with 15 years of local government experience who's going to want to know where the money went. He paused. You're not where you were 2 weeks ago, Emma. She looked up at him. Why does this matter to you genuinely? You didn't have to make any calls. You didn't have to sit in Dale's kitchen for 2 hours. Jack was quiet for a moment. He looked at the stars, then he looked back at her. When I was 22, he said, I got in trouble, real trouble, the kind that follows you, and there were people who had every reason to write me off, social workers, teachers, a judge who didn't, who saw something worth trying for. He paused. I spent a long time feeling like I owed a debt I couldn't repay. And then I figured out that the debt doesn't go back to the people who gave it. It goes forward. Emma was quiet. Those are kids in that school, Jack said. Somebody's going to have to stand up for them. Might as well be the people who notice. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow, keep your head down. Don't give Hale anything to work with. Emma nodded. She drove home. She lay in bed that night thinking about debts that go forward and 30 years of writing and a retired forensic accountant who had once said yes when he could have said no, and the specific weight of a world that contains people like Richard Hale and also inexplicably people like Jack Sullivan and Dale Ferris and Carol Reyes and Tom Briggs, who she hadn't even met yet. She didn't sleep for a long time, but when she did, she slept deeply. The following Tuesday, Emma sat in a booth at a coffee shop 12 miles from Cedar Valley, far enough from school that nobody would see them across from Tom Briggs, who was 41, underdressed for November, and who had pulled a small, spiral-bound notebook from his coat pocket before he'd even sat down. He had a face that didn't give much away, which Emma decided was probably a professional asset. He listened to her the way Dale had listened, with his full attention, no phone, no distraction. He asked precise questions. When she mentioned Dale Ferris, something changed in his eyes. Dale's involved, he said. He looked at the records Thursday night, and he thinks it's legitimate. He said the pattern was too practiced. He thinks it's not the first time. Tom Briggs sat back. He turned his pen over in his fingers 3 times. I've been looking at the district's administrative appointments for the past 2 years, he said slowly. Not specifically for this, it was background for a different story. But I noticed something, he paused. Richard Hale held a similar position at a school in Harmon County 2 years ago. Left voluntarily according to the records. The school had a budget shortfall that year that was attributed to enrollment decline. Emma stared at him. You already had this. I had a thread. I didn't know what it connected to. He looked at her. You're the connection. She felt something turn over in her chest. How long will it take you to put this together? She said. Filing the FOIA request, getting the district records cross-referencing with Harmon County, 2 weeks minimum. Probably 3. I may not have 3 weeks. Tom looked at her steadily. What does that mean? She told him about Richard's meeting with Dr. Marsh, about the way Richard had spent the last week building his baseline, about the document she'd been asked to sign that still didn't have the district protocol to back it up. Tom was quiet for a moment. He's going to come at you before I can publish. Probably. Then I need to move faster. He wrote something in his notebook, and you need to be ready for the moment he does. If he makes a formal complaint against you, insubordination, false accusations, whatever language he uses, you need to have your documentation already with someone outside the school who can verify it exists. I have copies in 3 places, Emma said. My personal email, a home drive, and she hesitated. Jack has a copy. Tom looked at her. Jack Sullivan. Yes. A pause. I know who Jack Sullivan is, Tom said. Everyone in Cedar County knows who Jack Sullivan is. Is that a problem? Tom turned his pen over again. No, he said slowly. No, actually, it might be the opposite of a problem. He seemed to be thinking something through that he wasn't quite ready to say out loud yet. He looked at Emma. How solid is he? Is he going to be there if this gets ugly? Emma thought about the gas station, about Dale's kitchen, about the stars over Cedar Valley, in the way Jack had said, the debt goes forward. Yes, she said, he's going to be there. Tom nodded. He closed his notebook. I'll start the FOA request today, he said. Don't tell anyone we talked. Not Carol, not Marsh, nobody at the school. Emma nodded. She drove back to Cedar Valley. She taught her afternoon class. She supervised recess in the cold. She helped two students finish a math worksheet they'd been struggling with since last Thursday. And when Richard Hale passed her in the hallway that afternoon with a scheduled smile and said, "How are you doing, Emma?" She looked straight at him and said, "Really well, Richard. Thanks for asking." And she meant every word of it because she was doing well. For the first time in weeks, she was doing well. The twist came 8 days later, and it didn't come from Richard. It came from Pam. Emma was in her classroom during lunch eating a sandwich and reading when Pam knocked and stuck her head in with the expression of someone delivering news they've been holding for a while and can't hold anymore. "Emma," Pam said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not react, okay? Just listen." Emma set down her sandwich. "Okay." Pam came in and closed the door. She stood near Emma's desk, not sitting, not relaxed, her hands twisting the lanyard of her school badge. "Richard asked me to pull your personnel file this morning," she said. Emma felt the floor change under her. Not dramatically, just a slight, certain shift. "My personnel file," Emma said. "He said it was routine administrative review." "But Emma," Pam stopped. Her face was doing something complicated. "He also asked me to flag anything that could be considered a performance concern or an issue with professional boundaries." Those were his exact words. Emma kept her face neutral. "What did you tell him?" "I told him there was nothing to flag." Pam's voice was tight. "Because there isn't. You're the best teacher in this building, and everyone knows it, including him, which is why he's doing this." "Pam, I know what he is," Pam said quietly. "I've known for a while. I'm the one who processes the requisition forms. I'm the one who files the receipts." She stopped. Her eyes were bright. "I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to do. Because I've got 3 kids and a mortgage, and I couldn't afford to." "I understand," Emma said immediately. "Pam, I understand." Pam pressed her lips together. "He's going to go after you, Emma, and he's going to use your personnel file to do it. Make you look unstable. Make it look like you're the problem." Emma looked at her. "Pam, is there anything in that file that he could actually use?" "No, your record is perfect. But that doesn't always matter when someone with the right access starts writing the narrative." Emma took a breath. "I need you to do something for me. Can you do something for me?" "What?" "Write down what you just told me. The date, the time, the exact words he used. Sign it, date it, and—" Emma paused. "And keep a copy somewhere outside this building." Pam stared at her. "You're already building a case." "I've been building a case." A very long pause. "Who else knows?" Pam asked. "People outside the school. People who can't be touched by anything he does here." Pam let out a slow breath. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She straightened. She stopped twisting her lanyard. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you remember about the requisitions. Dates, amounts, anything he asked you to process that felt wrong. Can you give me that?" "I can give you more than that," Pam said. "I kept copies." Emma looked at her. "I don't know why," Pam said. "I just something told me to. I made copies every time something felt off, and I put them in a folder at home. I've got 2 months of them." The room was very quiet. "Pam," Emma said slowly, "you might have just changed everything." Pam blinked. Something that had been wound very tight inside her seemed to loosen just slightly. "Can I," she started, "can I see the people you're working with, the people outside the school? I want to know who I'm trusting." "Yes," Emma said. "I'll introduce you to them this week." Pam nodded. She straightened her badge. She moved toward the door. Then she stopped. "He's planning something for Monday," she said. "I don't know the details. But he had a call with someone at the district office this morning, and he was very quiet afterward. Very settled, the way he gets when he's decided something." Emma looked at her steadily. "Monday. I could be wrong, but you don't think you are." Pam shook her head. Emma picked up her sandwich. "Then we have until Monday," she said. "Go back to lunch, Pam, and thank you." After Pam left, Emma sat for exactly 60 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called Jack. He picked up on the second ring. "He's pulling my personnel file," Emma said, "and he has something planned for Monday. We need to move this weekend." A beat of silence. "How much time do we have?" Jack asked. 4 days. Another beat. Then Jack's voice shifted. Not louder, not dramatic, just certain. "Then we use 4 days," he said. Emma heard something in the background on his end. Voices. The low rumble of something she couldn't quite identify. "Where are you?" she asked. At the clubhouse, he said, I've been talking to the guys about the school, about the situation. They want to help. Emma sat with that for a moment. Jack, I don't want anyone to do anything that nobody's doing anything that isn't above board, he said. But Emma, he paused. There are 168 of us who've been around long enough to know how to make sure a story gets told the right way. That's not, that's actually quite a lot. Emma thought about what it meant to have 168 people who wanted to help. She thought about Pam's copies in a folder at home. She thought about Dale Ferris and his 20 years of forensic accounting. She thought about Tom Briggs and his faux IA requests in his spiral-bound notebook. She thought about Carol Reyes in the quiet grief of someone who had been waiting for reinforcements. And then she thought about Richard Hale in his pressed shirt and his tactical smile, counting on everyone around him to be too afraid or too tired or too alone to fight back. He had miscalculated. He had miscalculated badly. Okay, Emma said, tell me what you're thinking. And Jack told her. And 4 days was, as it turned out, exactly enough time. Jack's plan was not complicated. That was what made it smart. He had said it to her on the phone Friday night, and she had written it down word for word because the simplicity of it was the kind that required discipline to trust. We don't attack, he had said. We deliver. Clean, organized, undeniable. We put the right information in front of the right people, and we make sure it's too loud to ignore. That was the plan. The weekend moved fast. Saturday morning, Emma drove to Carol's house. Carol answered the door in her reading glass, in a cardigan holding a mug of tea, and her expression when she saw Emma's face told Emma that Carol already knew the weekend wasn't going to be restful. Come in, Carol said. They sat at Carol's kitchen table for 3 hours. Emma told her everything: Dale Ferris, Tom Briggs, Pam's copies, the personnel file Monday. Carol listened without interrupting, which Emma had learned was Carol's highest form of attention. When Emma finished, Carol set down her mug. He's going to try to terminate you Monday, Carol said. It wasn't a question. That's what I think. On what grounds? Insubordination, unauthorized access to administrative records, creating a hostile professional environment. Emma said the words flatly. He's been building the paper trail all week. The meeting with Marsh, the personnel file review, he's setting it up so it looks like a legitimate performance issue. Carol took off her riding glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. Alan will go along with it, she said quietly. Not because he wants to, because Richard will have made it look so reasonable that Alan won't see another option. I know. And if you're terminated before Tom Briggs publishes, then the story becomes a disgruntled former employee making accusations, Emma said. Yes, I know that too. Carol looked at her steadily. What do you need from me? Emma put a folder on the table. I need you to write a formal statement. Everything you've observed since September. Specific dates, specific incidents, specific conversations, signed and dated. And I need you to send a copy to 3 places: to me, to Tom Briggs, and to someone Jack is going to identify to us today. Someone Jack is going to identify, Carol repeated. A contact at the State Department of Education. Someone Tom knows who handles fraud referrals. Emma paused. Carol, we're not going to the school board. We're going over them, directly to the state. Carol was quiet for a moment. Something moved across her face, not fear exactly, but the recognition of a threshold. The moment before a door opens that you know you can't close again. If I sign that statement, she said, and this doesn't work, it'll work. Emma, Carol, Emma leaned forward. Pam has 2 months of copied requisitions at her house. Dale Ferris has certified that the pattern is fraudulent. Tom Briggs has already found a matching incident at Hale's previous school in Harmon County. And Jack Sullivan has 168 people who are done watching this happen. She paused. It'll work. Carol looked at her for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen. Tell me exactly what you want me to write, she said. They worked until noon. At 2 in the afternoon, Emma was at Pam's house, sitting at Pam's kitchen table, while Pam's youngest daughter watched cartoons in the next room, going through the folder of copied requisitions page by page, while Dale Ferris sat across from them with his reading glasses in his adding machine. An actual adding machine, the old kind that printed a paper tape and turned every number into something irrefutable. Pam kept apologizing for not coming forward sooner. Emma kept telling her to stop. The 3rd time Pam apologized. Emma put her hand flat on the table and said, Pam, you kept copies when you didn't have to. You warned me when you could have stayed quiet. You're here right now. That's what matters. Everything else is done. Pam stopped apologizing. Dale finished his calculations at 4:15. He tore the paper tape off the machine and laid it on the table. Combined with what Emma had, he said, we're looking at approximately $19,000 in fraudulent procurement over 5 months. The documentation is clean enough to pass a criminal evidentiary standard. Pam made a sum that was almost a laugh. $19,000, she said, from a school that can't afford to fix the broken heater in the gym. Dale looked at her. Once this goes to the state, they'll be able to pull district-wide records. If the pattern holds at the same rate, the total figure could be significantly higher. The three of them sat with that for a moment. How much higher? Emma asked. I'd rather not speculate, Dale said. But if Hale has been doing this for 2 years across multiple schools, the number is going to be uncomfortable. Emma called Jack at 4:30. Dale finished the accounting summary, she said. We've got documentation for $19,000 minimum. Dale thinks district-wide could be significantly more. Tom's FOIA request came back faster than expected, Jack said. He found the Harmon County records. The budget shortfall there was $23,000. Never fully investigated. Hale left before the audit was complete. Emma closed her eyes for 1 second. This man has been doing this for years. Yeah. And moving on before anyone could catch him. Yeah. Until Cedar Valley. Until Cedar Valley, Jack said. Until you. She heard noise in the background on his end again. More than Friday. More voices, more movement, the particular low frequency of large engines somewhere. What's happening on your end? She asked. Getting organized, Jack said. We have a meeting tonight, full club. I need to brief everyone on where we are and what Monday looks like. Emma hesitated. Jack, what does Monday look like? You said you'd tell me, but we got cut off. A brief pause. Let me ask you something first. What time is Hale usually in the building? 7:30. He likes to be there before most of the teachers. And the meeting where he's planning to move on you, do you know when it is? Pam thinks mid-morning, after Dr. Marsh gets in and before the parent volunteer group arrives at 11. Richard doesn't like an audience. Good, Jack said. Then here's what Monday looks like, he told her. Emma was silent for a moment after he finished. That's it, she said. That's the whole plan. That's the whole plan. It's very simple, Jack said. Yes. I was going to say visible. Visibility is the point. He has spent months counting on nobody looking. On Monday, everyone looks. Emma thought about that. Okay, she said. Get some sleep tonight, Emma. You too. I will, he said. And she could tell from his voice that he probably wouldn't and that it wasn't anxiety keeping him awake, but something else, the focused, purposeful energy of a person who has been waiting for the right moment to do something that matters. She understood that feeling. She'd been living in it for weeks. Sunday passed away. The day before something important always passes too slowly and too quickly at the same time. Emma went through her classroom lesson plan for Monday with a level of attention that was partly professional habit and partly the need to do something normal with her hands. She made her lunch. She laid out her clothes. She called her mother in Denver and didn't tell her anything about any of it because her mother worried and there was nothing her mother could do and the time for worrying was almost over anyway. At 9:30 Sunday night, Tom Briggs texted her a single line, state education fraud contact confirmed. Documents received. Referral filed 6 p.m. today. Emma read it 3 times. The referral was already filed. Whatever Richard Hale was planning for Monday, he was planning it without knowing that the State Department of Education had already received a formal fraud referral with Dale Ferris's certified accounting summary, Carol's signed statement, Pam's copied requisitions, and Tom Briggs's cross-referenced evidence from Harmon County attached. Emma set her phone on the nightstand. She turned off the light. She thought about Monday. She thought about her student, Marcus with the hole in his shoe, and Lily, who always arrived 5 minutes late because her mother worked the early shift and couldn't get her there earlier, and James, who had started raising his hand in class last month for the first time, and whose face, when he got an answer right, was the specific kind of joy that made everything worth it. She thought about $19,000. She thought about all the things $19,000 could have bought for those children. Books, heaters, crayons, breakfast, the small, essential dignities of a proper education. She fell asleep with her jaw tight and her hands open. Monday morning arrived the way it was always going to, cold clear, certain. Emma was in her class at 7:15, earlier than usual. She had her lesson plans on her desk, her papers stacked neatly, her room in order. She had a cup of coffee from the machine in the break room, and she drank it standing by her desk, not sitting because she was too awake to sit. At 7:22, she heard Richard Hale's voice in the hallway. Pleasant, composed, "Good morning to someone," a light laugh, the sound of his office door opening and closing. She drank her coffee. At 7:45, Carol appeared in her doorway. Carol's expression was the carefully neutral one that Emma had learned to read as controlled emotion underneath. "He talked to Marsh this morning," Carol said quietly. "Before I got in, I could tell from Alan's expression when I arrived. Alan looked prepared, the way he looks when he's been briefed on something unpleasant and has decided how he's going to handle it." "How much time?" Impa asked. "The parent volunteer meeting is at 11, so before 11. Carol paused. "Emma, are you sure about today?" "Are you?" Emma said. Carol looked at her. "Yes," she said. "God help me, yes." "Then we're sure," Emma said. The school bell rang. Children began arriving. The hallways filled with the specific morning noise of 300 elementary school students. Backpacks swinging, voices too loud, sneakers squeaking on linoleum. Emma watched her class file in, and she felt the familiar lift of it, the way the room changed when they arrived, the way the air became warmer and more alive. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning, Ms. Whitaker," 22 voices said back. She taught. For 2 hours, she simply taught. She did it as well as she had ever done it because her students deserved that, because the thing that was about to happen in this school was going to happen whether she was excellent or distracted, and she chose excellent. She taught a reading lesson and a math block, and she answered questions, and she corrected errors, and she said, "Good try, keep going," 6 times, and meant it every time. At 9:45, her classroom phone rang. She picked it up. "Emma." It was Pam. Her voice was quiet and very controlled. "He's in Dr. Marsh's office right now, with the door closed. I can hear them talking, but not what they're saying." "Okay," Emma said. "Thank you, Pam." She hung up. She looked at her class. 22 children working on a writing exercise about what they would do if they could fly. "I'll be back in just a moment," she said to the room. "Keep working." She stepped into the hallway and sent a text message to one number. It said only now. She went back into her classroom. She sat at her desk. She waited. At 10:03, knocked on Emma's classroom door and opened it slightly and said in the professionally neutral voice of someone doing something they have been asked to do and do not entirely agree with, "Emma, Dr. Marsh would like to see you in his office." 22 children looked up from their writing exercises. "Thank you, Pam," Emma said. She stood. She straightened her jacket. She looked at her class. "Keep working on your flying stories," she said. "I want to read every single one. Don't stop until you've written at least 2 full paragraphs about where you'd go and what you'd see." She walked out. The walk to Dr. Marsh's office was 37 steps. She had walked it dozens of times. She counted them the same way she always did, not out of anxiety, but because counting was something her mind did when it needed to stay clear, like a metronome keeping time underneath everything else. She knocked on the door. "Come in," Dr. Marsh said. She came in. Richard was there. Of course he was there. He was sitting in the chair to the left, his portfolio open on his knee, his expression arranged in the particular configuration that she recognized now as his professional, concern-faced brow, slightly furrowed mouth, slightly softened, the face of a man who is about to say something difficult and regrets the necessity of it. She almost admired the craftsmanship of it. Almost. Dr. Marsh was behind his desk. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been up since 5 in the morning preparing for a conversation he did not want to have. Emma sat in the remaining chair. There was a pause. "Emma," Dr. Marsh said, "I want to start by saying that this conversation comes from a place of genuine concern for our school community and for you professionally." "Of course," Emma said. Richard shifted slightly in his chair. Something in his posture was different than the last time they'd been in this room together. More settled, more assured, the posture of a man who believes he has already won. "Richard has brought some concerns to my attention," Dr. Marsh continued, "that I feel we need to address directly. There have been observations about certain behaviors, unauthorized access to administrative systems, conversations with colleagues that some have described as creating unease, and He paused, glancing briefly at Richard, a pattern of what Richard describes as targeted harassment toward an administrative colleague. Emma heard the words. She felt them. She also felt underneath the feeling the cold clarity that had become her most reliable companion over the past several weeks. Targeted harassment, she said. I know that may sound harsh, Dr. Marsh said quickly, and I want to. Can I ask a question? Emma said. Dr. Marsh stopped. Of course. Is this a formal disciplinary meeting? A pause. Dr. Marsh glanced at Richard. It's a preliminary conversation, Richard said smoothly, about concerns that have been. Because if it's a formal disciplinary meeting, Emma said, I'd like Carol Reyes present, as my professional representative. Richard's expression did not change, but his right hand, the one resting on his portfolio, pressed flat against the leather. Pressing down, the tiniest, most controlled expression of what was happening underneath the surface. That shouldn't be necessary, Richard said. As I said, this is a preliminary. Then I'd like her here as a colleague, Emma said, for support, since we're apparently discussing something that affects my professional standing. Dr. Marsh looked genuinely uncomfortable. Emma, I don't think Alan, Richard said, gently, firmly, a reminder. The sound of a man pulling a leash. The room was very quiet, and then from outside the building they heard it. Not loud at first, not dramatic, just a low frequency beneath the normal sounds of the school day. A rumbling, the kind of sound that you feel before you fully hear it somewhere in the base of your sternum. Dr. Marsh frowned. What is the rumbling grew? It became the sound of engines, many of them, moving in formation with the specific, unmistakable rhythm of motorcycles. Dr. Marsh stood. He walked to his window. Richard did not stand, but his left hand now joined his right, both pressing flat against his portfolio, and the professional concern expression had been replaced by something that had no professional name. Something close to the expression of a man who has just realized that the board he has been standing on is not attached to anything. What is that? Dr. Marsh said softly. Emma did not move. She sat in her chair with her hands folded in her lap, and she said very quietly, I believe those are some people who wanted to make sure this conversation happened the right way. Dr. Marsh was still at the window. His voice when it came was strange, not frightened, not angry, almost wondering. There are dozens of them. They're pulling into the parking lot. 168, Emma said, give or take. Richard stood up. He stood up fast, which was the first uncontrolled thing Emma had ever seen him do. He crossed to the window and looked out. And for one brief, unguarded moment, the mask slipped entirely. He was afraid, not of the motorcycles, of what they meant. Because 168 motorcycles in a school parking lot at 10 in the morning was not a threat. It was a declaration. It was 168 people saying simultaneously, we are here, we are watching, and what happens in this room in the next hour is not going to be quiet. You need to get them out of here, Richard said. His voice was still controlled, but the smoothness was gone. This is a school. This is a disruption. They're parking, Emma said. They're not on school property. The lot where they're parking is a public lot. Richard looked at her, and for the first time in all the weeks she had known him, looked at her without the scheduled smile. Just looked at her, man to person, with the expression of someone recalculating everything. You planned this, he said. I built a case, Emma said. That's different. Dr. Marsh turned from the window. His face had gone through several expressions in rapid succession and had arrived at something that was, Emma thought, the beginning of understanding. The particular expression of a trusting man who was starting to see the thing he trusted badly. Richard, Dr. Marsh said slowly, what is happening? Nothing is happening, Richard said, and the smoothness was back, but it was thinner now like ice in late February. This is a disruption orchestrated by an employee who has been building a case of false allegations against a colleague and has apparently. There's a knock at your door, Alan, Emma said. Dr. Marsh looked at her, then at his office door. There was, in fact, a knock. Dr. Marsh walked to the door and opened it. Carol Reyes was standing outside. She had her reading glasses on, which meant she was in full professional mode, and she was holding a folder. Behind her, slightly to the left, was Tom Briggs, who had his spiral-bound notebook out already, and behind Tom was a man Emma hadn't met before, 50s trim, in a plain dark jacket with a very specific kind of lanyard badge that said State Department of Education Office of Financial Accountability. Richard's left hand moved to the back of the chair. Gripping it, Carol walked in. She handed the folder to Dr. Marsh. Alan, she said in the voice of someone who has waited a long time to say something and has spent that waiting time making absolutely certain she would say it right, I need to show you something. Dr. Marsh took the folder. He opened it. He looked at the first page. He looked at the second page. He looked at the third page. The room was completely silent. Outside, they could all hear the engines still settling one by one into a low idle and then cutting off until the silence from the parking lot and the silence in the office were the same silence, the specific silence that precedes something irreversible. Richard let go of the chair. He picked up his portfolio. He straightened his jacket. I'd like to speak with the district's legal counsel before continuing this conversation, he said. Nobody in the room spoke. He walked toward the door. The man from the State Department of Education stepped slightly to the left, not blocking the door exactly, but making his presence very clear in the doorway. Mr. Hale, he said in a voice that had been trained by years of exactly this kind of moment. My name is Robert Chen. I'm an investigator with the Office of Financial Accountability. I have a formal referral for the Cedar Valley Unified School District submitted yesterday afternoon, and I was hoping you'd be available to answer some questions. He paused. It would be better for everyone if you did that here rather than at our office. Richard stopped. He stood very still. And Emma watched the last calculation happen behind his eyes. The rapid final assessment of options, the way a chess player looks at the board when they understand that checkmate is 4 moves away, regardless of what they do. He sat back down. The folder stayed open on Dr. Marsh's desk. Outside, 168 engines had gone quiet. But the silence they left behind was not empty. It was the loudest thing Emma had ever heard. What followed was not dramatic in the way that movies make things dramatic. There were no raised voices. Nobody threw anything. Richard Hale did not confess with tears and a sudden access of conscience. He sat in the chair he had sat back down in, and he said very little. And what he said was careful and lawyered and designed to give away nothing, while Robert Chen asked questions from a legal pad with the methodical patience of a man who had done this many times. But the room had changed. Dr. Marsh sat behind his desk with Carol's folder open in front of him reading. He read the way a person reads when they are learning something they don't want to know, but understand they need to face. His expression moved through phases, confusion, then discomfort, then a slow settling gravity that was the expression of a good man understanding where his trust had been placed and what it had cost. At one point, without looking up from the folder, he said, Emma, how long have you known? Fully about 3 weeks, Emma said. I started suspecting in November. Dr. Marsh turned a page. Why didn't you come to me? I did, Emma said quietly, in a manner of speaking. You told me to let Richard handle it. Dr. Marsh closed his eyes for a moment. I did, he said. I did say that. He opened his eyes. He looked at Richard. And the thing in Dr. Marsh's face at that moment was not anger. It was something sadder than anger. The disappointment of a man who genuinely believes in people and has just been shown the cost of that belief. Alan, Richard said, and his voice was back to smooth, but the smoothness was structural now, scaffolding rather than charm. You need to understand that what's in that folder is one interpretation of Richard, Dr. Marsh said, quietly, firmly. Please don't. Richard stopped. Dr. Marsh looked at Robert Chen. What do you need from us? Access to the district's financial records for the past 24 months, Chen said, and a list of every school where Mr. Hale has held an administrative position. You'll have both by end of day, Dr. Marsh said. Emma watched Richard's face at that moment. She had expected something anger, contempt, the specific cold fury of a man caught. What she saw instead was something more complicated, a kind of stillness, as if some internal machinery had simply stopped. She thought suddenly and unexpectedly about the children at his previous school in Harmon County. She thought about the $23,000 that had vanished from their budget and had been attributed to enrollment decline and had never been properly investigated. She thought about whoever the Emma Whitaker was at that school, whoever had noticed, whoever had been afraid, whoever had maybe been alone in a way that she was not alone today. She thought about how close she had come to being alone today. She thought about an $18 bill in a rainy diner and a man with tired blue eyes who had known somehow in the way that certain people know things that she was someone worth remembering. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. When it was over, Robert Chen had a full briefing. Dr. Marsh had Carol's folder and a set of next steps, and Richard Hale had been asked to surrender his building access card and escorted calmly professionally without drama to his car. Emma watched from the hallway window. She didn't gloat. She didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. What she felt was something quieter and more durable than triumph. The feeling of a thing that needed doing that had been done. The specific satisfaction of having been on the right side of something difficult and having held on. Carol appeared beside her. "It's done," Carol said. "It started," Emma said. "There's still the investigation, the district records, the Harmon County case." "Yes," Carol said, "but he's not in this building anymore." Emma looked at her. "How are you feeling?" Carol considered the question seriously the way Carol considered everything. 17 years, she said. "I've been in this district. I've seen a lot of things. I've picked my battles carefully. Sometimes too carefully." She paused. "I'm feeling like I picked the right one this time." Emma put her hand on Carol's arm briefly. Then she straightened and looked toward the front of the building. "I need to go check on my class," she said. "Emma," Carol caught her arm, "there are still 168 motorcycles in the public parking lot." Emma had almost forgotten. "Right. Are they going to stay there?" "I don't know," Emma said honestly. "Let me find out." She walked to the front entrance. She pushed open the door. The morning air hit her cold and sharp and clean, and the parking lot across from the school was exactly as Dr. Marsh had described from his window. Row after row of motorcycles, black leather and chrome in the December light. 168 riders standing or leaning or sitting, a wall of quiet waiting presence. That was the most peaceful form of power Emma had ever witnessed. Jack was standing at the front and had his helmet in his hand. His jacket was open. He looked at her with that steady, unhurried attention. She walked toward him. When she reached him, she didn't know what she intended to say. She had a lot of words in her, somewhere gratitude, relief, the specific weight of a morning that had changed everything, but none of them seemed like the right size for the moment. She stopped in front of him. He looked at her. "Well," he said. "He's out of the building," and she said, "State investigator is inside. Marsh has the documentation." Jack nodded once. "The school board is going to get a copy of everything by noon," Emma continued. "Tom Briggs is filing his story today. The investigation will take a while, but Robert Chen said the documentation is solid enough for a criminal referral." Jack nodded again. "You should know," Emma said, "that there's a very good chance this leads back to his previous school. Harmon County, $23,000, a case that was never properly investigated." Jack's jaw tightened. "How many kids at that school?" "About the same as here." He looked past her at the school building. His expression was not satisfying or triumphant. It was the expression of someone absorbing the full weight of a thing, not just the part in front of them, but everything behind it, everything it connected to. "Okay," he said. "Okay," Emma said. A beat of quiet. "I owe you something," Emma said. "You don't owe me anything. I owe you. I don't even know how to count what I owe you. You and Dale and everyone here." She looked at the rows of riders. Some of them were looking at her. Most were just standing, patient and present, the way they had probably learned to stand in situations that required more than showing up. "This doesn't settle a debt," Jack said. "This is just what you do when you see something worth doing." Emma looked at him. She felt the words behind her eyes, but she didn't say them because some things don't need to be said and are actually diminished by being said. She just looked at him, and he looked back, and the December morning sat around them with its cold clarity and its improbable hard-won peace. From inside the school, the 10:15 bell rang. "I have to go back in," Emma said. "Go," Jack said. She turned. "Emma." She looked back. He held up a small piece of paper between two fingers. Worn at the edges, a diner receipt. "Still carrying it," he said. She looked at it. An $18 receipt from Rosie's Roadside Diner on Route 9, the most expensive $18 she had never actually spent. She almost smiled. She did smile. She turned and walked back into the school. Behind her, she heard the first motorcycle engine start, then another. Then gradually 168 engines coming back to life, not in a roar, not in a show, just in the ordinary, purposeful sound of people who came to do what they came to do and are now, having done it, heading back into their lives. Emma walked down the hallway to her classroom. She opened the door. 22 children looked up. "Did you all finish your flying stories?" she asked. Yes, the room said, mostly, with a few guiltier silences. Good, Emma said. She sat at her desk. Who wants to share first? A hand went up in the back row. Marcus, with the hole in his left shoe and the specific brightness in his eyes of a child who has decided to believe that trying is worth it. I'll go, Marcus said. Go ahead, Emma said, and he did. Marcus's flying story was about going to his grandmother's house in Georgia. She had died 2 years ago, he explained at the front of the classroom in the matter-of-fact way that children sometimes discuss enormous losses, and he had never gotten to say goodbye because it happened fast and there wasn't money for the trip. But if he could fly, he said he would go back to the last summer he remembered there, and he would sit on her porch and eat the biscuits she made from scratch. And he would make sure to say everything he wanted to say before it was too late. The room was very quiet when he finished. Emma looked at him, this 8-year-old boy with the worn left shoe and the raised hand and the story that was too large for a third-grade writing exercise. And she thought about $19,000 and what it meant and what it cost, not just in supplies and books and heaters, but in the quieter arithmetic of children who deserved better and got less because someone decided their school was an opportunity. She thought about that for exactly one moment. Then she said, Marcus, that is one of the best things I've ever heard read aloud in this classroom. Marcus sat down. His ears went red. He was smiling at his desk. Emma taught until 3 o'clock. She taught as well as she had ever taught because the morning had taken something tight out of her chest and replaced it with something steadier and steady, translated directly into presence. And presence was the best thing a teacher could bring to a room. When the last student left, she sat at her desk for a while and did nothing. Just sat. The classroom around her was quiet and familiar. The alphabet above the whiteboard, the word wall, the reading corner with its 3 beanbag chairs, the windowsill where a small succulent was doing its best in the winter light. She had put that succulent there in September. It had been small then. It was bigger now. Small things grew if you paid attention to them. Carol knocked at 3:20. Robert Chen wants to meet with you and me tomorrow morning, she said. 8 o'clock. His office in the district building, not here. Okay. He said to bring any additional documentation we haven't shared yet, anything we held back. Emma thought about the detailed timeline she'd kept on her personal laptop dates. Time's exact words exchanged the escalating pattern of pressure from Richard over 7 weeks. She had built it the way she built lesson plans, methodically, completely, nothing assumed. I have more, she said. I'll bring it. Carol leaned against the door frame. She looked tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has only just set it down, the particular exhaustion that comes not from exertion, but from relief. Tom Briggs called me this afternoon, she said. The story is going online tonight, local paper first. He's already had calls from 2 regional outlets who picked up on the FOI filing. Emma looked at her. It's moving fast. It's moving the way it should have moved months ago, Carol said. Emma didn't argue with that. After Carol left, Emma packed her bags slowly. She checked her classroom one more time, windows locked, lights off, doors secured. She walked down the hallway and out through the front entrance into the cold December afternoon. The public parking lot across from the school was empty. Every motorcycle was gone. 168 engines had rolled in and rolled out and left no trace, except for something harder to see, a shift in the air of the school, a change in what the morning had been, the permanent alteration of a day that would have gone very differently if nobody had shown up. She drove home, she made dinner, she ate it at the kitchen table with Tom Briggs's article open on her laptop. The headline read, Cedar Valley School Administrator removed amid fraud investigation. State agency confirms criminal referral. She read it once, she read it again, she checked the facts against her own memory, the way she always checked things, and found that Tom Briggs was exactly as thorough as Jack had said he was. Every claim sourced, every number accurate. Dale Ferris quoted by name at his own request with his credentials listed in full. Carol's statement paraphrased but attributed. The Harmon County connection documented the budget shortfall named the absence of investigation, noted with the specific bluntness of a journalist who had spent 15 years covering institutions that preferred not to be looked at closely. Richard Hale was not quoted. He had not responded to requests for comment. Emma closed the laptop. She called Jack. Did you see the article? She asked. Yeah, he said. How are you feeling? A pause. A real one, not the tactical pause of a person choosing words, but the genuine pause of a person actually checking in with themselves. Honestly, Jack said, always. I'm feeling like it's not over yet. The investigation is going to take months. The district's going to have to do a full audit. The Harmon County case needs to be reopened. Richard's going to lawyer up and fight it as long as he can. He paused again. And I'm feeling like those kids deserve to know that it's not over, that the people who showed up today are going to keep showing up. Emma sat with that for a moment. What does keeping showing up look like? I've been thinking about that, Jack said. The guys have been talking about it all afternoon. There's interest in doing something concrete for the school. Not a gesture, something real. Supplies, repairs, whatever the school actually needs. Jack, you don't have to. I know we don't have to. His voice was quiet but firm. We want to. There's a difference. Emma thought about the broken heater in the gym that Pam had mentioned, about the reading corner in her classroom and the 3 beanbag chairs that had been there since the Clinton administration, about the playground equipment that had one swing missing its seat and had been that way since October. The gym heater, she said, it's been broken since September. The kids have been doing PE in their coats. Done, Jack said without hesitation. And there are about 40 students who don't have proper winter gear. Coats, gloves, boots. The school has a fund for that, but it's essentially empty. We can fix that. Jack, Emma, she let the moment sit. Why does this keep surprising me, she said. Every time I think I understand what you're doing, it turns out to be bigger. It's not bigger, he said. It's just consistent. This is what it looks like when a lot of people decide to give a damn about the same thing. She was quiet for a moment. Then, will you tell me something about the club, about the guys? What made them all say yes when you briefed them Sunday night? What happened in that room? Jack was quiet for longer than usual. She could hear him shift, heard the faint sound of wind somewhere on his end, like he might be outside. I told them about you, he said. About the diner, about the $18, about a teacher who spent her own money on other people's kids and didn't tell anyone about it, and sat alone in a booth grading papers at 9 o'clock at night. He paused. And I told them about a man who was stealing from children, from kids who already had less than they should. Another pause. You want to know what happened in that room? Nothing complicated. 168 people decided at the same time that this was something worth getting up for. Emma pressed her lips together. She was not going to cry. She had already decided not to cry today, and she had kept that decision through a great deal more than a phone call. Thank you, she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of it. Get some sleep, Jack said. You have got Chen tomorrow. I know. And Emma, the article's going to get attention. By tomorrow morning, people are going to be calling the school, calling the district, calling the school board. Be ready for that. What kind of attention? The kind that makes it harder to make this go away quietly, Jack said, which is exactly the kind we want. She said goodnight and hung up. She opened her laptop again. She navigated to the article. She looked at the comments section, which she usually avoided because comment sections were rarely illuminating, but this one was different. Parents from Cedar Valley, teachers she recognized, community members she didn't. A comment from someone who identified themselves as a parent from Harmon County that read, "This happened at our school too. We never had answers. I'm so relieved someone finally looked." She closed the laptop. She went to bed. She slept better than she had in 2 months. The next morning arrived with a different quality than Monday's had. Monday had been the held breath before. Tuesday was the exhale after, and exhales Emma had learned were not simple or peaceful. They came with their own complications. Robert Chen's office was in the district administration building, 10 miles from Cedar Valley Elementary. He met them at 8 o'clock exactly, which Emma appreciated. A man who said 8 and meant 8 was a man whose other words could probably be trusted too. Hun had a conference table and a whiteboard and 3 cups of coffee waiting. He was precise and calm and had the energy of someone who had been doing important work for a long time and had stopped needing external validation of its importance. Emma liked him the same way she'd liked Dale Ferris immediately and for functional reasons. Carol sat to Emma's left. Robert Chen sat across from them. He had a thick folder in front of him and a legal pad beside it. First, he said, "Want to be clear about your status in this investigation. You are not subjects. You are witnesses and complainants. Everything you share with me is protected. If anyone at the school district, anyone attempts to retaliate against either of you for your cooperation, That is a separate federal violation, and you contact me immediately. He slid 2 business cards across the table. Emma took one. Carol took one. Second, Chen continued, the referral you filed Sunday was among the most organized and complete I've received in 14 years in this office. Dale Ferris's accounting summary alone was sufficient to open a formal investigation. The additional documentation from Ms. Garrison, he glanced at his folders, Pam Garrison, the school secretary. She's not going to be in trouble, Emma said immediately. No, Chen said. She's a witness. Her copied records are extremely valuable. Copying procurement documents as a matter of personal record keeping is not a violation of any policy she's subject to. He paused. In fact, without her copies, some of the earlier months would have been harder to establish. She did the right thing. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. She hadn't realized she'd been holding that. Third, Chen said, I want to tell you what we found when we pulled the district records yesterday afternoon, because you deserve to know the full scope of what you were dealing with. He opened his folder. Richard Hale has held administrative positions at 4 schools in this state over the past 6 years, he said. Cedar Valley is the 4th. At each of the previous 3 schools, there were budget shortfalls that were attributed to various operational causes. Enrollment changes, utility increases, maintenance costs. None of them were formally investigated. Emma heard Carol make a small sound beside her. The total across all 4 schools, Chen said, is currently estimated at approximately $91,000. The room was very quiet. $91,000. Emma did the arithmetic without meaning to. She was a teacher. She thought in classroom units. $91,000 was years of school supplies. It was hundreds of winter coats. It was new playground equipment and repaired heating systems in the specific small dignities that children in underfunded schools went without every single day. How, Carol said, her voice was very controlled. How does someone do this at 4 schools without being caught? The pattern is deliberate, Chen said. He keeps amounts under the threshold that triggers automatic district review. He targets schools with high administrative turnover, where records are already somewhat disorganized. He builds relationships with school leadership, specifically with principals, who have a trusting disposition. Chen paused, choosing his words carefully, and who may not be inclined to look closely at someone they've come to see as a competent colleague. Emma thought about Dr. Marsh, the tired face behind the desk, the folder in his hands. I did say that. Where is Dr. Marsh in all of this? Emma asked. Alan Marsh is not a subject of this investigation, Chen said. There is no evidence that he had knowledge of or participated in the fraud. He was in our assessment an unwitting facilitator. He paused. He's been fully cooperative since yesterday. He's devastated, frankly. He asked me to tell you both, and I'm conveying this because I think it matters that he is profoundly sorry for not listening sooner. Emma absorbed that. It was not simple what she felt about Dr. Marsh. It was not simple at all, because she understood the mechanism of what had happened to him, the specific vulnerability of a person who leads with trust and understanding. A mechanism didn't make its consequences hurt less, but it also didn't make the person monstrous. It just made them human in a way that had costs. What happens now? Emma asked. The criminal referral goes to the state attorney general's office. That process typically takes 3 to 6 months. Hale's been placed on administrative leave with no access to district facilities pending the outcome. Chen turned a page in his folder. The district will conduct a full financial audit going back 6 years. Harmon County has been notified and they're reopening their budget review. The other 2 schools are being contacted. And the money, Carol asked. The $91,000 right asset recovery is part of the AG process. It's not guaranteed, but in cases with this level of documentation, recovery of at least partial amounts is common. Chen looked at them both. The Cedar Valley School Board has also been briefed. They're holding an emergency meeting this afternoon. The superintendent was, let's say he was very motivated to respond publicly and quickly given the media attention. Tom Briggs's article, Emma said. Tom Briggs's article, yes, plus 2 regional outlets that ran with it this morning, and 1 TV station that's been calling the district office since 7. Chen closed his folder. He looked at Emma. I want to ask you something, Ms. Whitaker, and you can choose not to answer. Go ahead, Emma said. The motorcycles yesterday, the Hells Angels, Jack Sullivan. Chen's expression was neutral and professional. How did that happen? Emma considered the question. I paid for a stranger's dinner, she said. He remembered it. Ken looked at her for a long moment. $18, he said. Yes. I was quiet for a moment. I've been doing this work for 14 years, he said. I've seen a lot of cases. The thing that determines whether they come to anything is almost never the evidence. The evidence is usually findable if you look. What determines it is whether anyone has the courage to keep looking when it gets difficult. He paused. You kept looking, Miss Whitaker. And then you were smart enough to understand that courage and stubbornness alone aren't enough. You need the right people around you. Emma nodded. The right people showed up, Chen said, simply as a statement of fact. Yes, Emma said, they did. She drove back to Cedar Valley. She taught her afternoon class. At 4:15, her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. It said, school board meeting tonight, 7 p.m., district building. You should be there. She texted back, will Carol be there? His reply came immediately, Carol, Dale, Tom, Pam, and about 40 other community members. Emma stared at the text for a moment. 40 community members. She typed, how did 40 community members find out about a school board meeting in 4 hours? Jack's response, social media. Also, my guys talked to some people. Also, Tom's article mentioned the board meeting in the last paragraph. Emma laughed, an actual laugh, the real kind that catches you off guard. She hadn't laughed in a while. It felt strange and good the way it does when something has been absent long enough that you've almost forgotten what it felt like. She drove to the district building at 6:45. The parking lot was more than half full, which was not something that happened at school board meetings in Cedar Valley. The district board meetings typically drew a handful of the most dedicated community members, a few parents with specific grievances, and one retired teacher named Bill Hawthorne, who attended every meeting and asked exactly one question regardless of the agenda. Tonight, the parking lot had family vans and pickup trucks, and the kind of ordinary cars that represented the ordinary citizens of a small Colorado town who had read an article that morning and decided to show up. Jack was standing outside the entrance with two of the riders Emma had seen in the parking lot Monday, a big man with a gray beard named Pete, and a woman about Emma's age named Rosa, who had a quiet watchfulness that Emma had noticed Monday and liked. 40 turned into closer to 70, Jack said when Emma reached him. I can see that, Emma said. Rosa looked at Emma with the particular directness of someone who has decided within the first 5 seconds of meeting a person whether they respect them. Jack's told us a lot about you, she said. Good things, I hope, Emma said. Accurate things, Rosa said, which in my experience is better. Emma found herself smiling. She looked at the people filing into the building. Parents she recognized from school pickup. Teachers she saw in the hallway every day. A few faces she didn't know at all, people from other parts of Cedar County who had read Tom's article and driven over. A woman with 2 small children who caught Emma's eye and nodded with an expression that said, without words, I know what you did, and it mattered. Emma nodded back. They went in. The board meeting began at 7 o'clock with the board chair, a woman named Patricia Hendricks, who was 63 sharp and visibly unhappy about the circumstances that had produced a room this full, calling the meeting to order and immediately departing from the printed agenda. We are here tonight, Patricia said, because an extraordinary situation has come to our attention, and this board intends to address it with full transparency and without delay. She looked at the room. She looked at the parents and teachers and community members in the quiet row of riders in the back who were present the same way they'd been present. Monday's solid patient not demanding attention, but occupying space in a way that made ignoring them impossible. First, Patricia said, on behalf of this board, I want to formally and publicly apologize to the students, families, and staff of Cedar Valley Elementary School. Our oversight processes failed. They failed for too long. That is on us, and we take full responsibility. The room was quiet. Emma was sitting in the third row between Carol and Pam. She felt Pam's shoulder against hers, Pam, who had kept copies in a folder at home because something had told her to. Pam, who had come into Emma's classroom at lunchtime and said, I know what he is, and I didn't say anything, and I'm saying it now. Patricia Hendricks continued. She outlined the scope of the investigation as Chen had shared it with the district. The 4 schools, the 6 years, the $91,000. She said the number plainly without euphemism because the room deserved plainness. A sound went through the audience at the number. Not dramatic, just a collective breath. The sound of people absorbing something that confirmed what they had suspected but hadn't fully believed. The district is committed to full cooperation with the state investigation, Patricia said. We are also committing tonight to 3 immediate actions. She listed them. A complete financial audit of all district procurement for the past 6 years, a formal review of administrative oversight protocols, and a dedicated fund to be established immediately with seed money drawn from the administrative reserve budget to address the resource gaps at Cedar Valley Elementary that had been exacerbated by the fraudulent activity. The room responded with the kind of applause that isn't theatrical, but is genuine, the particular sound of people who have been waiting for someone in authority to do the right thing and are hearing it happen. Emma didn't applaud. She sat very still. She was feeling something that she hadn't expected to feel in this room. Not relief exactly, not satisfaction. Something more complicated. The thing you feel when you've been fighting something for so long that its absence takes a moment to register. The thing you feel when the thing you've been bracing against is no longer there, and your body hasn't caught up to it yet. Carol leaned slightly toward her. You okay? I'm trying to figure out what okay feels like, Emma said quietly. Carol made a small sound that was almost a laugh. It feels like this, she said, exactly like this. The public comment period opened. 12 people spoke. Parents talked about their children, about the supplies they'd bought with their own money, because the school couldn't provide them, about the winter coats their kids went without, about the specific indignity of being a family that was already stretched thin, being further stretched by an institution that was supposed to support them. A man stood up in the back row 50s, broad, someone Emma didn't recognize, and said, I'm not from Cedar Valley. I drove here from Millbrook because I have a child in the Harmon County School District, and I read what happened there, and I need to know that what happened there is going to be part of this investigation. Patricia Hendricks looked at him. It is, she said. I can confirm that Harmon County is in contact with the state investigator's office. The man sat down. His hands were shaking slightly. Emma could see it from the third row. She thought about that, about a father sitting in a different school board meeting in a different county who had read an article that morning and driven 60 miles because his child went to one of the other schools. Because the thing Emma had started in Cedar Valley had ripples she hadn't anticipated and couldn't fully see. That was the thing about waves. You made them from where you were standing, and then they moved out past the edges of what you could observe. After the meeting in the parking lot, people stopped to talk to Emma. Parents she knew, teachers, a few community members. They said things she received with genuine gratitude and some difficulty because she was still learning how to accept this kind of acknowledgement, how to hold it without deflecting it and without being overwhelmed by it, how to say thank you and mean it fully without disappearing inside it. A woman stopped her near the entrance. Small, maybe 60, with the specific directness of someone who had been through something hard and had come out the other side with no remaining patience for anything less than honest. My granddaughter is in your class, she said. Lily. Emma knew Lily, always 5 minutes late. Mother on the early shift. Bright, careful, deeply kind, in the way of children who have had to learn early how to read a room. She talks about you every night, the woman said. Every night. Ms. Whitaker said this. Ms. Whitaker did that. She paused. I've been worried about that school for a long time. Things never adding up. Kids not having what they need. She reached out and put her hand briefly on Emma's arm. Thank you for not walking past it. Emma looked at her. She thought about what Jack had said. This is just what you do when you see something worth doing. She thought about $18 in a rainy night and the long chain of consequences that started with not looking away. Lily is one of the best parts of my day, Emma said. Every day. The woman nodded once. She squeezed Emma's arm. She walked away. Jack was waiting by his motorcycle when Emma made it to the parking lot. Most people had left by now. A few riders were still there, talking in the way that people talk at the end of a long day that mattered, loose and tired, and with the specific warmth of shared effort. How do you feel? Jack asked. Like I said something similar to Carol and still don't have a complete answer, Emma said. He nodded. He understood that. The board's fund, Emma said. The one Patricia Hendricks announced. I want to make sure it's used right, that it actually gets to the kids. You'll make sure of that, Jack said. It wasn't a question. He said it the way you say something that is simply factually true. I'll try, Emma said. That's enough, he said. Trying is enough. She looked at him. You told me that first night at the diner you asked me why I helped you, and I said because everyone deserves kindness when they need it. She paused. Do you remember what you were thinking when I said that? Jack was quiet for a moment. The parking lot around them was nearly empty. The December cold was deep and clear. I was thinking that I hadn't heard anyone say something like that and mean it in a very long time, he said. Emma nodded. I was also thinking, he said, that the kind of person who means it when they say it is the kind of person that things like this. He gestured vaguely at the building behind them, at the night, at everything the last 2 weeks had been tend to happen around. Emma looked at him for a moment. Is that a good thing or a terrifying thing? Jack almost smiled. Probably both, he said. She drove home through the December dark with the heater running and her hands loose on the wheel and her mind doing what it always did after something large, sorting through it slowly, the way you sort through a room that's been rearranged, putting things in their right places, understanding what had moved and what remained. Richard Hale was gone. The investigation was open. The board had acted publicly and on the record. Tom Briggs's article was spreading. The Harmon County father had driven 60 miles because a wave had reached him that started in Cedar Valley. And in the morning, 22 children would come into her classroom and she would teach them. Marcus would be in the front row. Lily would be 5 minutes late. And Emma Whitaker would be exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she had always believed in doing in a school that was still imperfect and still underfunded and still fighting, but fighting now with more people on its side than it had had 2 months ago. Small things grew if you paid attention to them. She pulled into her driveway. She sat in the car for a moment. She thought about the gym heater, about 40 kids who needed winter coats, about the swing with the missing seat. She pulled out her phone. She texted Jack the swing on the east side of the playground. Third one, the seat's been missing since October. The kids call it the ghost swing. She waited. His reply came in under a minute. It said, consider it handled. Emma looked at those 3 words for a long moment. Then she got out of the car and went inside and made herself a cup of tea that she actually drank while it was still hot for the first time in as long as she could remember. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with her case files, not to review them, not to add to them, just to look at them. The whole stack of it, the photographs, the printed records, the notes in her handwriting, Dale's paper tape with its long column of numbers, Carol's signed statement, Pam's copied requisitions, the physical evidence of everything she'd seen and refused to look away from. She thought about what Chen had said. The thing that determines whether cases come to anything is almost never the evidence. It's whether anyone has the courage to keep looking. She thought about the specific afternoon in November when she had opened the supply requisition records and found what she found and sat in her empty classroom and felt the cold clarity of a decision being made in a very deep part of herself. She had not known that afternoon that there was a Jack Sullivan. She had not known about Dale Ferris or Tom Briggs or Pam's folder or 168 motorcycles or a retired forensic accountant with an adding machine and 20 years of reasons to care. She had only known what she could see, and she had chosen to keep looking at it. That was where it started. Not with Jack, not with the diner, not with $18. It started with a woman alone in a classroom at the end of a long day who saw something wrong and decided it was worth the cost of doing something about it. Everything else had grown from that. She gathered the files and put them neatly back in their folder. She carried them to the small cabinet in her hallway where she kept important documents and placed them inside carefully beside her teaching certificate and her lease agreement and her mother's birthday card from last year that she hadn't been able to throw away. She closed the cabinet. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to bed. And for the first time since the whole thing began, since the night at the diner, since the requisition forms, since Richard Hale's scheduled smile, and the specific weight of choosing not to look away, Emma Whitaker fell asleep with the uncomplicated ease of a person who has done what they came to do and knows it and is ready for whatever comes next. The ghost swing had a seat by Friday morning. Emma didn't see it happen. Nobody did, apparently. Jack had sent 2 of his guys over at 6 in the morning before the school opened, and they had installed a new swing seat, checked the chains, tightened the bolts on the 2 adjacent swings while they were at it, and left before 7 without telling anyone. Emma found out because Marcus came running into the classroom at 8:05, breathless, with the specific energy of a child who has witnessed something that feels like magic. Ms. Whitaker, he said, barely through the door. The ghost swing has a seat. Emma looked up from her desk. Is that right? It's blue, Marcus said. Brand new. Nobody knows who did it. Emma knew, but she let the mystery stand for a moment because some things are better when they retain a little of their magic. Maybe someone decided it was time, she said. Marcus looked at her with the evaluating expression of an 8-year-old who is deciding whether to press further or accept a beautiful thing at face value. He chose the beautiful thing. Can we use it at recess? He asked. It's a swing, Emma said. That's what it's for. He went to his seat beaming. That small moment, Marcus in the blue swing seat, in the specific joy of a child who has had something restored that he didn't even know he'd been missing, carried Emma through a morning that was otherwise dense with the administrative weight of everything the previous week had set in motion. There were emails from the district, a call from Robert Chen's office confirming the timeline for the formal audit, a meeting request from the school board's new community liaison, a position that apparently had been created specifically in response to the previous week's events. A voicemail from Tom Briggs saying 2 more regional newspapers had picked up the story, and one of them wanted a statement from Emma directly. She didn't call Tom Briggs back until lunch. I'll give you a statement, she told him, but I want to be careful about what I say. That's fine, Tom said. What do you want it to be about? Emma thought for a moment. The kids, she said. It should be about the kids. Not about what happened, not about Richard, not about the investigation. About what the school is for and who it's for. Tom was quiet for a moment. That's actually going to land harder than anything about Hale, he said. You know that, right? I know, Emma said. She gave him 3 sentences. She stood by her classroom window and said them carefully and meant every word. She didn't reference Richard Hale by name. She didn't talk about fraud or investigations or school board meetings. She said that Cedar Valley Elementary existed for 300 children who deserved every resource that was meant for them, and that the people of Cedar Valley had demonstrated in the past week that they understood that, and that she was grateful every day to be a teacher in a community that had shown up the way this one had. Tom read it back to her. That's the quote, Emma said. That's exactly the quote. The article that ran that afternoon used it as the final paragraph. Emma didn't read it until after school. When she did, she sat at her desk for a moment and thought about the strange alchemy of the past month. How one evening in a diner had become an investigation, that had become a movement, that had become 3 sentences in a regional newspaper about children and community and the basic decency of showing up. She thought about Jack carrying an $18 receipt in his jacket pocket for weeks. From all things, carried carefully, over time saw. The first Friday in January, the gym heater came back to life. It had been dead since September, and the school had been managing with space heaters in the corners that were never quite enough. And the children had been doing PE in their coats, which Emma had mentioned to Jack exactly once, and which Jack had apparently treated as a problem requiring immediate resolution. Lonnie had contacted a heating contractor. He knew a man named Vic who had ridden with the club for 20 years and had his own HVAC business, and Vic had come in the week between Christmas and New Year when the school was empty and spent 2 full days replacing the faulty components, cleaning the system, and doing what he called a full going over of the building's heating infrastructure at no charge. Emma found out about it the way she found out about most things Jack arranged after the fact from someone else, with the specific feeling of receiving a gift from someone who had deliberately made themselves impossible to thank in the moment. She called him anyway. The heater, she said. Vic said it was in worse shape than it looked, Jack said. He found 2 other issues while he was in there. Fix those too. Jack. It's cold, Emma. Kids shouldn't be cold at school. She pressed her lips together. She had made herself a rule about not crying, and she was going to keep it. How do I repay this? Any of this? You're still asking that question, he said. I'm going to keep asking it. Then I'll keep giving you the same answer, he said. You don't. It goes forward. That's how it works. She thought about the forward direction of things, about the Harmon County father who had driven 60 miles and what that meant for the investigation into his school, about the 2 previous schools whose budget shortfalls were now being reviewed, about the $91,000 that represented years of accumulated theft from children who needed every dollar that was meant for them. The investigation was moving, slowly the way legal processes move, but certainly. Robert Chen had updated Emma twice in December. Richard Hale had retained an attorney, which was expected. The state attorney general's office had formally accepted the criminal referral, which was significant. The full district audit had begun, and the preliminary findings had already exceeded the original estimates. Chin called me yesterday, Emma said. The audit findings. The number is bigger than they thought. How much bigger? They're not ready to give a final number yet, but he said it's significant, that the pattern goes further back than the 6 years they originally looked at. Jack was quiet for a moment. Meaning? Meaning Richard Hale may have been doing this longer than anyone knew, at schools that weren't on the original list. She heard Jack's exhale, slow and deliberate. Then it needed to be found, he said. Yes, Emma said, it did. There was a pause. How are you holding up? Jack asked. Honestly. Emma sat with the question. It was the kind of question she often answered reflexively, find good getting through it because teachers were trained by professional habit to redirect from themselves. But Jack asked it the way he asked everything, with the specific patience that didn't leave room for reflexive answers. Some days are heavy, she said. The investigation, the attention, people at the school treating me differently than they used to, not badly but differently. Like I'm something other than a teacher, and I just want to be a teacher. You are a teacher, Jack said. That's what made this happen in the first place. I know that in my head, Emma said. My chest takes a little longer sometimes. Jack made a small sound that might have been understanding. You'll find your way back to ordinary, he said. It just takes a little longer when the ordinary got interrupted. Emma looked at her classroom, the alphabet above the whiteboard, the word wall, the succulent on the windowsill bigger now than it had been in September. How are you? She asked, honestly. A pause, the genuine kind. I'm good, he said. Something shifted after all this, in the club and the guys. Hard to explain. It's like when you do something that matters, something that actually matters, it changes what you think you're for. He paused again. We've been talking about doing more of this kind of thing. Not this specifically, but being present in the community. Schools, youth programs, whatever needs people who are willing to show up. Emma felt something warm and certain move through her. That's not hard to explain at all, she said. No, Jack said. I guess it isn't. February brought the first concrete result of the criminal investigation, and it came not as a dramatic courtroom moment, but as a two-sentence press release from the state attorney general's office that Tom Briggs texted to Emma at 7:40 in the morning on a Tuesday. Richard Hale has accepted a plea agreement. Sentencing in April. Emma read it twice. She was in her car in the school parking lot when she read it 5 minutes before the first bell. She sat there for a moment. She had expected to feel more. Some rush of vindication, some weightlifting, some version of triumph that matched the scale of what had been built to get here. Instead, she felt something quieter and more complex, not emptiness, but a kind of deep settledness. The feeling of a long project arriving at its natural conclusion. She texted Jack, "Did you see?" He replied within seconds, "Just saw. How do you feel?" She thought about it. She typed like it's real, like it finally became a thing that happened instead of a thing that was happening. His reply, "That's what resolution feels like. Takes some getting used to." She put her phone in her pocket. She got out of the car. The February cold was sharp, and the parking lot was beginning to fill with the ordinary morning arrival of students and parents and teachers, all of it moving with the particular rhythm of a school day, beginning the way school days begin, regardless of what else is happening in the world. Marcus arrived at 8:04, 1 minute later than usual, slightly out of breath, backpack swinging. He waved at Emma from across the parking lot with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a child who is simply glad to see someone he likes. She waved back. She went inside. She taught. The twist that Emma hadn't anticipated, the one that arrived quietly and without any of the drama she had come to associate with unexpected turns, came in March. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email, an actual letter, handwritten on plain paper, delivered to the school in an envelope addressed to Ms. Emma Whitaker, Cedar Valley Elementary School, Cedar Valley, Colorado. Pam brought it to her classroom during prep period with a slightly formal expression of someone who has looked at an envelope and understood that whatever is inside it matters. Emma opened it at her desk. The handwriting was from a woman named Sandra Kowalczyk. She was a fourth-grade teacher in a school in Westbrook, which was one of the schools that the expanded investigation had identified as having had Richard Hale in an administrative capacity 7 years ago. She wrote that she had seen Tom Briggs's original article in December and had followed the story as it developed. She wrote that she had noticed irregularities at her school 7 years ago and had brought them to her principal and been told they were procedural issues, and had accepted that answer because she was new and frightened and hadn't known what else to do. She wrote that she had spent 7 years believing she should have pushed harder and not knowing what pushing harder would have looked like. She wrote, "You showed me what it looks like. I needed to see that. I think I needed to see that for 7 years." Emma read the letter 3 times. She set it on her desk and looked at it. Outside her classroom window, the February cold was giving way to the first uncertain suggestions of March. Not warm exactly, but slightly less resolute in its coldness. The kind of weather that was making up its mind. She thought about Sandra Kowalczyk in Westbrook, carrying the weight of 7 years of wondering whether she should have done more. She thought about what it meant for a letter like that to exist, what it said about the reach of a single decision. The way one person choosing not to look away could travel through time and geography to land on a fourth-grade teacher's desk 7 years later and mean something. She picked up her phone. She called Tom Briggs. "I need Sandra Kowalczyk's contact information if she gave it," Emma said. "She did," Tom said. "You got the letter, just now." "She reached out to me first," Tom said. "She asked if it was okay to contact you. I said yes and gave her the school address." A pause. "Emma, she's not the only one. I've had contact from 3 other teachers at schools in the extended investigation. People who noticed things and were either ignored or afraid to push. Sandra's the one who wrote to you. The others wrote to me." Emma was very still. "How many schools total?" she asked. "The investigation has now identified 6 schools over 9 years, Tom said. "The final number, what he took altogether, the AG's office isn't releasing it until sentencing. But Chen told me off the record that it's going to be a number that makes people angry." "It should make people angry," Emma said. "Yes," Tom said. "It should. She thought about Sandra's letter, about 3 other teachers who had seen something and been alone with it, about the specific loneliness of noticing something wrong and having no one to stand with you. She thought about Dale's kitchen table and Carol's signed statement and Pam's folder and 168 engines. She thought about what it meant to not be alone. "Tom," she said, "I want to write back to Sandra, and I want to suggest something to you." "What kind of something?" "A follow-up piece," Emma said. "Not about the investigation, about the teachers, about what it looks like when someone notices something and doesn't have the support to act on it, and what changes when they do. About what we could build if we made it easier for people in schools to speak up." A long pause on Tom's end, the kind of pause that meant he was thinking seriously about something rather than filling silence. "That's not a newspaper article," he said. "That's a series." "Then it's a series," Emma said. Another pause. "This is going to take you outside Cedar Valley," Tom said carefully. "This is going to make you a face connected to something bigger than one school in one town." Emma thought about that. She thought about what she wanted, which was to be a teacher, a good one in a classroom with 22 children who needed her present and attentive and unremarkable in the best possible way. She thought about Sandra Kowalczyk's 7 years. "I know," she said. "Let's do it anyway." The sentencing in April was not public in the way Emma had half expected. It was a courtroom proceeding, formal and procedural, attended by attorneys and officials and a handful of journalists. Tom Briggs was there. Robert Chen was there. Emma was not. She had been asked if she wanted to attend, and she had thought about it carefully and decided that she did not. The courtroom was not where she needed to be. She needed to be in her classroom. It was a Thursday. She taught a science lesson about the water cycle, how rain becomes rivers, becomes clouds, becomes rain again, the endless forward motion of water that never truly stops but only changes form. She drew it on board, and her students copied it in their notebooks, and she answered questions for 40 minutes. And it was exactly as ordinary and important as teaching always was. She found out the result from Tom's text at 2:15. 4 years. Ordered to pay full restitution to all 6 schools. Permanent bar from working in educational administration. She read it during recess, standing by the window of her classroom, watching her students in the cold April air. Marcus was on the blue swing, pumping his legs with the focused effort of a child trying to go as high as physics will allow. Lily was at the climbing structure with 2 of her friends, laughing at something that Emma couldn't hear from inside, but whose quality she could read even through the glass, the unguarded full-body laugh of a child who feels safe. Emma looked at them for a long time. She thought about $91,000 divided across 6 schools over 9 years. She thought about how many blue swing seats that was, how many gym heaters, how many boxes of 64-color crayons and winter coats and school lunches, in small human dignities that had been quietly stripped away, one forged requisition at a time. She thought about restitution. The word, the concept, the complicated promise of it, that something taken can be returned, that a wound can be addressed, that the ledger can be corrected even if it can never be fully balanced. She thought about Sandra Kowalczyk sitting with 7 years of a question she couldn't answer. She pulled out her phone. She opened the draft she'd been working on for 2 weeks, her response to Sandra's letter. She had written and rewritten it many times, trying to find the register that was honest without being falsely modest and encouraging without being falsely assured. She had wanted to say something true about what it meant to stand up for something alone and what it meant to not be alone in the distance between the two. She pressed send on the email she'd finally finished the night before. Then she put her phone in her pocket and went back to watching her students. The bell rang. They came in. "Ms. Whitaker," Lily said, slightly breathless from the climbing structure, her coat still half on. "We learned something at recess." "What did you learn?" Emma said. "Marcus can go really, really high on the new swing." "That's not a surprise," Emma said. "Marcus has always been someone who goes as high as he can." Marcus, already at his desk, looked up with his ears going red again. He was smiling. Emma settled her class. She moved into the afternoon's reading block. She taught. It was Jack who told her about the April fund deposit because Jack was the one who had coordinated it. The restitution payments to Cedar Valley Elementary wouldn't arrive for months. Legal processes moved the way legal processes moved. But the state investigation had made Cedar Valley a known case. And in the weeks after sentencing, something unexpected began happening. Donations. Small ones mostly from individuals who had read Tom's articles. A few larger ones from organizations Emma had never heard of. A corporate matching grant from a company in Denver whose HR director had grown up in Cedar Valley and had read the story in January and spent 3 months quietly putting something together. The total by the end of April was $43,000, designated specifically for Cedar Valley Elementary's Student Resource Fund. Jack told her over the phone in the same straightforward way he delivered most information. 43,000, Emma said. "And more coming," Jack said. "Tom's series is running next month. That tends to bring more." Emma sat at her kitchen table. She thought about what $43,000 meant, not abstractly, specifically. She had been a teacher long enough to know exactly what it meant in classroom terms. She did the arithmetic without meaning to the way she always did. "That's years," she said. "That's years of supply budgets. That's the swing and the heater and the coats and then some." "It's a start," Jack said. "It's more than a start." "Maybe," he said, "but the real thing isn't the money, you know that." Emma knew that. The real thing was harder to quantify and more durable than any dollar amount. The real thing was a school that had been seen, a community that had chosen to look closely at something ugly and then chosen to build something better in the same space. A group of children who were receiving what they deserved, not because circumstances happened to allow it, but because specific adults had decided it was non-negotiable. "Jack," she said, "I want to ask you something I've been wanting to ask for a while." "Okay." "The receipt," she said, "the one from the diner. Do you still have it?" A pause. "Yeah," he said. "Why?" she asked. "I've been trying to understand that since you showed it to me in the parking lot." $18, a diner receipt. "Why does it matter?" She heard him breathe, settle into the question. "Because it's proof," he said finally. "Not of what you did, I don't need proof of that, but proof that the world works the way it's supposed to work sometimes. That a person can do a small right thing and it actually matters." A pause. "I've been writing for 30 years, Emma. I've seen a lot of what people are at their worst. A lot of what institutions do when nobody's looking. A lot of what happens to good people when they're alone." Another pause. "That receipt reminds me that it doesn't always go that way. That sometimes a $20 bill in a moment of not looking away becomes this." He let the "this" hang in the air between them, big and unspecified and entirely understood. Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Can I have it?" she said. A surprised pause. "The receipt?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I want to show it to my students someday," she said. "When they're old enough to understand what it means. I want to show them a diner receipt and tell them the whole story and say, this is where it started. One moment, one decision, $18 and the choice not to look away." She paused. "I think that's a lesson worth keeping." The silence on his end was the long, genuine kind. Yeah, Jack said quietly. I think it is too. Will you send it to me? No, he said. Emma blinked. I'll bring it, he said. There's something else the guys want to do at the school. End of May. Before summer break. We've been talking about it for a while. Emma felt the familiar lift of something unplanned being put into motion. What kind of something? Nothing dramatic, he said. Just showing up. The way we do. She understood. She had come to understand over these months what Jack's version of showing up looked like: specific, practical, personal. Not a gesture. An act. Okay, she said. End of May. The last Friday of May was a Friday that Emma would remember for the rest of her life, not because it was dramatic and it wasn't, but because it had the specific quality of a thing that has come full circle and arrived somewhere better than where it started. Jack had coordinated with the school, not secretly with Dr. Marsh, who had spent the months since December doing the quiet, genuine work of a man trying to understand where his trust had been misplaced and what he owed to the school because of it. Dr. Marsh had become, Emma thought, someone worth trusting again, not because he had changed fundamentally, but because he had allowed himself to be changed by what he learned, which was a different and more difficult thing. The riders arrived at 9 in the morning, not 168 this time, 43. The number was deliberate. Jack had told her one for every $1,000 in the community fund, which Emma thought was the kind of symbolic thinking that was either beautiful or excessive and turned out to be both. They came without announcement, no fanfare. They pulled into the public lot they parked and they walked into the school, not the whole school, just the common spaces, the gym, the playground, and they got to work. Because this time they had brought tools and paint and 36 brand new books for the library that had been chosen specifically by a committee of Cedar Valley elementary students who had been asked the previous week what books they wished the school had. Emma stood in the hallway and watched 43 people, leather vests and work gloves, and the unhurried efficiency of people who know how to do things move through the school, and she thought about the first time she had seen Jack Sullivan in a diner on Route 9, being watched by a room full of people who had already decided what he was, and she thought about what assumptions cost and what it meant to refuse them. Carol appeared beside her. The gym ceiling is getting painted today, Carol said. The district approved it. Vic is doing the HVAC check again while he's here. She paused. And 2 of the riders are carpenters. They're fixing the broken cabinet in the supply room that's been broken since August. Emma looked at her. Who organized all of this? Emma said. Carol smiled. The full, real version of Carol's smile, which was rarer than the professional one and completely different in quality. Jack and I have been talking for 3 weeks, she said. I may have given him a very detailed list of everything broken in this school. Emma stared at her. Carol. You were busy, Carol said. Someone had to. Emma laughed. The real kind again. The kind that caught her off guard. At 10:30, Jack found her in her classroom. He knocked on the open door. He had a work glove under his arm and a streak of white paint on his left hand from something he'd been doing in the hallway. He looked. Emma thought about the word and landed on settled. The same thing she felt, but expressed differently through someone who had spent 30 years learning to carry things without showing it. He reached into his jacket pocket. He held out the receipt. Emma took it. She held it in both hands, a small piece of thermal paper slightly worn at the edges from Rosie's roadside diner. Date at the top, 1 meal, total 1840. She looked at it for a long moment. She thought about Marcus and his flying story about his grandmother's porch. She thought about Lily arriving 5 minutes late every morning and how that 5 minutes represented a mother who worked the early shift so her daughter could be in a school with a teacher who would be there when she arrived. She thought about 22 children and what they carried and what she tried to help them set down every day. She thought about Sandra Kowalczyk's 7 years. She thought about an $18 meal and a rainy night and a room full of people who had already made up their minds. She looked at Jack. Thank you, she said, for carrying this. Thank you, he said, for starting it. She walked to her desk. She opened the center drawer, the one where she kept important things, the red pen, the spare granola bars, the small object or two that carried enough meaning to deserve proximity. She placed the receipt inside. She closed the drawer. At noon, the school ate lunch with its 43 guests. Dr. Marsh had arranged at cafeteria tables pushed together extra chairs. The school's cook and 2 volunteers from the parent group having spent the morning making enough chili for everyone. It was loud and crowded and entirely undignified in the best possible way. Riders sat with students and answered questions with the patient openness of people who had been asked about their motorcycles before and were still happy to describe them. Marcus sat next to Pete, the large man with the gray beard, and peppered him with technical questions about engine displacement that Pete answered with complete seriousness, which Marcus received with complete seriousness, which was somehow one of the most perfect things Emma had seen in her classroom that year. Lily sat across from Rosa, who was telling her about a road trip through the Rocky Mountains, and Lily was listening with her chin in her hands and her eyes wide with the specific attention of a child whose imagination has been fully engaged. Emma sat at the end of a table and ate her chili and watched. This, she thought, this is what it builds, not just the fun and the investigation and the sentencing and the restitution. This, the loud, improbable, slightly chaotic reality of 43 people who showed up because one woman paid for a stranger's dinner and chose not to look away. After lunch, the students went back to class. The riders began preparing to leave. There were goodbyes in the parking lot, some formal, some not. Students hanging out of windows calling down things that teachers pretended not to hear. Parents who had come to pick up early and stayed because the energy of the day had the quality of something worth witnessing. Jack was the last one in the parking lot. He was putting on his helmet when Emma came out. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. He said it with the particular weight of a person who has been carrying something and has decided it's time to set it down. Emma waited. "When I left that diner," he said, "the night you paid for my meal, I sat on my bike for about 10 minutes in the rain." He paused. "I want you to know that I was not in a good place that month. Some things had happened. Not dramatic things, just the accumulation of things that happen over a long life, and some of them had been heavy for a while." He looked at her. "I was not doing well." Emma kept her face very still. "And then a stranger paid for my dinner," he said. "And she didn't look at me like I was something to be afraid of or look down at or manage from a careful distance. He paused. "She just looked at me like I was a person who needed something and she had it to give." He adjusted the strap on his helmet. "I don't know what I would have done differently that month if you hadn't done what you did," he said. "I'm not being dramatic. I want you to know the full accounting. Because you asked once why I was helping you, and I told you about debts that go forward, which is true. But it's not the whole truth." Emma looked at him. She felt the words behind her eyes and she let them be there without saying them because some things don't need words. Some things are complete in the silence between two people who understand each other well enough to not need to fill it. $18, she said finally. $18, Jack said. He put on his helmet. He got on his motorcycle. The engine turned over, that specific low-resonant sound that she would never again hear without thinking of the December morning in a parking lot full of presents in a school that had been seen. He pulled out of the lot. She watched until he turned onto Route 9 and was gone. She stood in the May sun for a moment. The school was behind her, alive with the particular afternoon energy of children finishing a day that had been unusual and full. She could hear it through the walls, the hum of 300 kids doing what kids do when someone has paid attention to them, when the school around them is fixed and warm and stocked and staffed by people who are there because they chose to be. She turned and walked back inside. She went to her classroom. She opened the center drawer of her desk. She looked at the receipt for a moment. Then she looked at her classroom, the alphabet, the word wall, the succulent on the windowsill that had started small in September and was something else now entirely. She thought about what she would tell her students someday when they were old enough to hold the whole story. She thought about the version of it she would tell, not the investigation, not the legal proceedings, not the $91,000 and the criminal referral and the plea agreement. She would tell them the human version, the version that started in a diner on a rainy Tuesday night and moved outward from there, touching lives and changing outcomes, and ultimately landing here, in this room where 300 children were receiving what they deserved. She had a lesson plan for the afternoon. She had students arriving in 4 minutes. She had spelling tests to return and a science project to begin, and 17 unfinished flying stories she still needed to read. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. She picked up her red pen. And when her students came through the door, some of them are one by one with their backpacks and their questions and their unfinished stories and their specific, irreplaceable weight of being young and human and full of things they were still figuring out how to carry. Emma Whitaker was ready for them, the way she was always ready, the way she had always known she would be from the first moment she understood that this was what she was for. Because some people are built for the grand gesture, and some people are built for the long work, and Emma had always known which one she was. Not the moment of arrival, but the daily act of showing up. Not the wave, but the water constant, patient finding every crack and filling it, wearing down every obstacle, not through force, but through persistence, through presence, through the simple and radical act of continuing. The door opened. Marcus came in first. He was carrying something, a drawing carefully folded. He put it on her desk without saying anything. He went to his seat. She unfolded it. It was a drawing of a swing, blue, high in the air, and below it in 8-year-old handwriting that was still learning how to hold the pen at the right angle. He had written, "Someone fixed it." That means someone cared. The spelling wasn't perfect. The handwriting was still developing. The truth of it was absolute. Emma set the drawing on her desk where she could see it. She looked at her class, 22 faces looking back at her, waiting ready, carrying everything they carried and bringing it here, because here was where they had learned to bring it. "Good afternoon," she said. "Good afternoon, Ms. Whitaker," 22 voices said. She smiled. The real one. The small, true one that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with a woman who had chosen one ordinary rainy evening at a diner on Route 9 to look at a stranger and see a person, and had kept making that choice every day since in every direction she looked. Some people change the world with one enormous act. Emma Whitaker changed it the way teachers always do. One child, one day, one small and unrepeatable moment of refusing to look away. And that, in the end, was the only miracle that had ever actually been needed.